The following podcast contains spoilers and adult language. And, ladies and gentlemen, the man you've all been waiting for. It's...
Andrew Lincoln?
No. No, not at all. It's Kim Coates, damn it.
Ooh. Oh.
This is a message from the Office of Emergency Preparedness. Due to the recent crisis, we ask that you remain in your homes. Do not attempt to communicate or interact with the creatures, even if they are people you know.
Lock your doors. Bar your windows. Evil is coming. It's time for Aim for the Head, a horror apocalypse entertainment podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Diana and Steve.
Hi, welcome back to Aim for the Head podcast. I'm Diana.
And I'm Steve.
This episode, we're going to be discussing episode 4 of season 2 of The Walking Dead, Dead City. Title of the episode is Feisty Friendly. And I like the way that they used the title in the episode. I thought that was fun because it described it, he used it to describe the little gladiator match that they did, but it's also kind of describes the entire meet and greet that they had. They're all kind of feisty, but they're trying to be friendly, but it becomes feisty, and man, the Croat just can't shut up.
No, and of course the Dama's worried he's gonna blow it.
She got good reason to think that. So, yeah, she not dumb. So, all right, so before we get into the details of the episode, we usually like to rapid fire, just like quick thoughts on the episode, how we felt about the episode as a whole. Steve, you went first last week for episode 3, so it is my turn to go this week.
Oh, yeah.
And before we get into the heavy-duty parts of the recording, I just want to let our listeners know that I have come down with a cold over the last 24 hours. Yeah. And I'm trying really hard to be quiet with my cough drops. If you hear it clicking, I'm really sorry because I know I have like misophonia problems. So my bad. But obviously my voice is a little off. I might, if I have to cough, I'll mute the microphone, which Steve didn't know was a thing because he's terrible and mean to me. And I do have tea with me, but bear with us. It mostly feels just like my voice is off. So you get to hear my Demi Moore voice for this episode, and isn't that a gift, really?
Well, yes, and it is, and I think I speak, Diana, for all of us when I say that your voice has always been way off. So, all right,
okay,
let's go.
All right, so my thoughts on Feisty Friendly. Okay, we were just talking before we started recording, and Steve and I have been honest about our feelings on the first 3 episodes. We've been, there have been some bright spots. There have been some performances, some scenes, some new characters that have been some bright spots so far this season. But overall, we've been mostly disappointed with a lot of the stuff we've been seeing. I think it's fair to say, and it's been a shame. These are great actors, great. The situations, etc. Just it feels kind of like a waste. We're not at Fear the Walking Dead levels yet, but they're towing that line here and there. But that's mostly been closer to the first episode. The first episode had a lot of problems. The second episode improved slightly. The third episode improved slightly as well. A couple more things we were interested in and liked. And I think in this 4th episode, while it's certainly not perfect and there are still things that we will be critical of, I would say that this is their best effort so far. And I think they're finding their stride. And I gotta say, you have to give it up to the Kim Coates of it all. We talked last week where I said that the missing ingredient is the Negan Maggie factor. And they did have a scene together, and there was some, there's some chemistry there between the two of them. But really, it's the Brugal and Negan combination is really the combination that we've been waiting for that we didn't know we were waiting for. So Every scene that Kim Coates is in just sort of sparks and sparkles, and he's just he's such a great addition to the cast. He's that sort of wacky flavor that The Walking Dead always enjoys, an eccentric person, and he just really leans into it. And that it's not, there's nothing painted on about him. He's a really great actor. He's working his butt off. He chewing the scenery like crazy here, but I would just say overall, I was really much more pleased with this episode, and I really hope that they sort of take the momentum of this in this episode and are able to sort of run with it and keep it moving through the rest of the season. So how about you? What did you think of episode 4, Feisty Friendly?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I the last 2 episodes I've really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And I think really, the first episode of the series was okay. It was just kind of a very basic first episode of a series. They didn't, they weren't coming off a cliffhanger. They were just sort of like, hey, this is a whole new season and here's where everything is. And these are all the people that are going to be in it, and all that kind of like setting it up stuff. And it was fine. Mm-hmm. The episode I had a problem with was episode 2, and that was just because the invasion plan was like the dumbest plan that nobody would ever do ever, right. And that just took, I think, both of us right out of it, where you're just like, well, this is so stupid, right. But now that like, it's over, that unpleasantness happened and they're on the island and, like we can start the story. The last 2 I really liked, and you're absolutely right. I mean, this episode, Kim Coates just, he's great. In every scene, he's great, and he's funny and weird. And it's so great because I'm watching it. I'm like thinking like, this is not the guy from Sons of Anarchy. You know what I mean? It's just such a different performance, and it's almost like it's like a little foppish in a way, where he, he just is kind of this very like larger than life. Like he's like, I have to be this spectacular guy, right. and at one point, I think the Croat calls him New Money. Yes. Which I thought was hilarious. And so, he made this episode just so much fun. I think we mentioned this in one of the episodes, or maybe 1 or 2, where we were saying you can't compare this show to The Last of Us, even though they're on at the same time, right. Even though they're on the same hour, it's just you've got to separate the 2 and just remember that The Walking Dead comes from a comic book, and the last 2 episodes to me are total comic book. That's the feeling that I'm like, it's like I'm watching a comic book where it's over the top, it's slightly beyond like what would normally happen or what you would think would happen, but it's still fun and interesting. And so I really enjoyed this episode. The biggest problem I have is with the ghoul fighting, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, because I know you have a problem with it too. So, but yeah, the rest of it I thought was a lot of fun, even if there were some kind of like really moments in there, in terms of like characters deciding to do stuff and so on. But anyway, yeah, like I said, I'm enjoying it, and if the rest of the show is like the last 2 episodes, I think it's going to be really great.
Yeah, I agree. Great. All right, so before we get into our points on the episode, let's dive into some of the nuts and bolts, which are the episode description and then the writer and director for the episode. So Steve, why don't we chat about those first, and then we'll get into our points. So go right ahead.
All right. Well, again, unfortunately, we do not have a sponsor for this week, but hopefully next week. Yeah. Hopefully next week, right? We'll see. We'll see. I got thrown off because we were supposed to do this yesterday, and then we didn't. And anyway, life intervened. So here we are. But the episode in question is 2.4 of The Walking Dead, Dead City. And the title, as you said, is Feisty Friendly. And our very, very scant description is as follows. Maggie uncovers surprising information. Negan attempts to outmaneuver a slippery foe. And that is your episode description. And yeah, I'm not sure if both of those things happen, but sure, why not? Let's just go with it.
I like their use of the slippery foe, because they're talking about Bruegel, but they did like sort of grease up the ghouls for that ghoul fight. So
they did.
So it's a good job with the double meaning.
A double meaning.
I don't understand what the surprising information Maggie is that she uncovers, but I mean, there's a couple of different things. It could be, whatever.
It could be the location of the methane. It could be that Herschel is, under the power of her,
right,
as Negan put it.
Yeah. That the woman that was in the picture is an actual person.
It's a real person.
He lied and said it was just someone he saw on the street.
Right.
Yeah. Could it be that Negan's no longer in like a prison cell? He's like out and about. It could be any number of things.
A bunch of stuff, because there was a lot of surprising things she ran into in this episode.
Right.
So
Right.
I agree. All right. So that's your description. So our writer and director. So our writer for this week is a gentleman named Keith Staskowitz, I think is how you say his last name. Staskowitz? Let's go with that. Yeah. And we've actually talked about him a little bit before in other podcasts because, and I'll get to that, but he, last season on Dead City, he was the executive story editor for all 6 episodes.
Oh, okay.
So, and I believe this year he has been bumped up to a producer credit. As well of this, but this is the only episode of the show that he has written. Okay. But his other stuff that he's done, he wrote one episode of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon. Perhaps you're familiar with that series.
Familiar.
You are familiar, yes. He wrote episode 2.2, and that one was entitled Moulin Rouge, if you remember.
Yeah.
So he has a little experience in the Walking Dead universe besides the Dead City, but he's been involved with Dead City since the beginning of the show. Like I said, he was the story editor, so he kind of had a hand in all of the scripts from last year in punching them up and tweaking and so on. And then this year, like I said, I believe he's a producer. So, and then beyond that, he has written for a show called Close Up. And he's written for another show called 3 Delivery, which I'm not familiar with either of those, but they are within the last couple of years. So, but that is your writer. And then our director is Edward Ornelas, which is the same guy who directed last week. So, so we get the double again, which is very, it's kind of a thing here in The Walking Dead of late that when they bring a director in, they let them usually do 2 episodes right in a row.
Right.
So,
and it's interesting. There was improper information out on the interwebs.
I know.
Yeah, I was led to believe that Lauren Cohan also directed 2 episodes and that she did episodes 4 and 6. But turns out that was incorrect, and she is just directing episode 6. So that was
okay.
The internet lied to me, people.
I
know that's going to sound
shocked.
surprising, but
right. This is a first. I mean, this is really the first time the internet has ever been incorrect. I don't know what to say.
I should find out who I read that from and report them to the internet police.
You should. I mean, this right here, this is surprising information. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
I gotta say, because I had already typed in on my little sheet about writer and director where I put down what have they done and stuff like that. So I have it, so I sound like I'm really smart. Last week, for the director, I'd already typed in Lauren Cohan, thinking, well, that's what Diana said to put that on there, so that's what it's gonna be. And so then I'm watching the credits, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Wait a cotton picking minute. That's not Lauren Cohan at all. That's some other dude.
There was definitely some pearl clutching. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, well, geez. I hate to be a part of your pearl clutching. That's a shame that I contributed.
You did, and you did too, because I'm like, you mean Diana lied?
The internet lied to Diana, and I'm so disappointed.
I am too. I would have liked to have seen Lauren Cohan direct 2 episodes. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, Edward Ornelius, as I said last week, a huge, long-time guy for the last 15, 20 years, has directed tons and tons of television. And like we said, Chicago Med, NCIS Origins, Lock and Key, The Promised Land, The Resident, and unfortunately for all of us, including himself, he directed one episode of Fear the Walking Dead, which was season 7, episode 14, Divine Providence. So it was right near the end of the Knucklehead regime. It wasn't even like a, first couple of season good time of Fear the Walking Dead. It was in the I can't believe I'm watching this time. So
it's all right.
Yeah.
He couldn't believe he was directing it either.
She cashed that check and moved on.
Yeah, I know. You gotta pay the bills, people.
You gotta pay them bills.
Yeah.
But anyway, that is your writer and your director.
Awesome. So our opening scene is this really great just a short little stinger of a scene with Bruegel, and he's at the window, and at first it feels like he's monologuing, which would be so like his character. It's like he's talking to himself, he's pontificating, but then you hear some noises in the background and it's clear he's talking to someone.
And he's also he's holding a rat.
Yeah. That's the opening moment is holding of the rat. And since we already had that moment with the Dama in another episode, you see him holding the rat, and it takes a second for you to say, oh, well, it's not the Dama, those are man hands. And then you're not thinking that it's Bruegel, because you've been teased with this other moment. But, it pans out and it is him, and he's at the window and he's very Dr. Evil. Like, he's just petting the rat, like looking out over his kingdom. It's very...
My precious.
Yeah, it was great. But then he puts the rat into a bucket and kicks it across the room. And then it's clear that there's, we find out later that that's where Tony is kept, but we don't know that at the time. So you just assume it's either, a ghoul, could be his fighter ghoul. We don't know because we don't see it. We just see him, there's a hand or whatever that reaches out from the curtain and he sort of pushes it in there. But he's, pontificating about life and things, and it's a great Bruegel scene. It's such a great sort of introduction to what he's gonna bring to the show. We already had like a little taste of him in that first episode, I think it was, with him just really briefly, but then this really sort of cements like, oh, okay, he's going to bring this energy to the show. And it's just great. Just a great little scene there. But I made a note because once he gets the rat and gives it over to what we assume is a ghoul, right? There's some really unfortunate closed captioning that's happening while whoever is in there is eating that rat. And it's like crunching, blah, blah, blah. Or it says something about, rat something, and then crunching, and then after a second it says sloppy chewing. And I thought that was the damn funny. Sometimes when I see an amusing, closed captioning thing put in there, I have to include it. But that's, kudos to them, because it really was sloppy chewing, and that really sort of describes the moment. So if I were hard of hearing and I maybe knew what sloppy chewing sounded like at one time, and I heard someone say that, I'd be like, oh yeah, I can.
Oh, I know what that is.
I know exactly what sloppy chewing is, and I can picture it in my brain. So yeah.
For me, that's like sloppy chewing. That's like, tell me that's not an Adam Sandler movie.
Oh, right.
Like
right.
like Adam Sandler and like, David Spade and like Chris Farley, like in sloppy chewing,
You're not wrong. That's probably right. Yeah. So I saw that and I had to include that, as a discussion topic. Why not?
I just like that he was kind of talking about, man, it would be so great to have the grid back on and the power and the light. Like he's sort of like, I got the idea that he was, already imagining like what he was going to do once he had the methane.
Right. Yeah.
And wouldn't that be so grand, and Madison Square Garden and, Broadway and all these, New York places lit up again, just like in the old days, in the before time. And it was kind of a neat little look into like, some of his, grandiose plans.
Right.
That of course, he's going to be the guy in charge. It won't be anybody else. It's just him. But,
right.
But yeah, I did appreciate that. And then you're right. You kind of, at first you think he's just sort of like just talking to himself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, oh no, wait, there is somebody in there. And when the guy ate the rat, I was like, well, okay, that means he can't be a ghoul.
Right.
It has to be
tell
because
there, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, it was just sort of like, okay, well, we'll see who that is at some point. Like maybe Kim Coates is playing two parts, and that's like his twin brother that he keeps chained up back there. You know what I mean? It could be anything,
Yeah, until we found out it was Tony too. I thought like, could it be like a family member situation, like a the governor with a
with his dead child or whatever it was.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So it was nice because it's like it added this creep factor that you weren't expecting from Brugal, and it's just a tiny little scene, just so well done to sort of lay the groundwork for Brugal for the season. Just well done. So
absolutely,
yeah. So we credits, and our opening is our
back at the cafe.
Are we back at the cafe?
It's either back at the cafe or no. I tell you that I think before the credits roll, I think doesn't Negan and everybody pull up in the cars and stuff.
Yeah, because he's
I think
watching from the window for them to arrive. I bet, right?
Yeah, and then the credits roll when Negan, like they all get out, and Negan's like, "What do we got to do? Ring the damn doorbell?"
Yeah.
And then it cuts to the shot of the Met, and you see that that's where they're going. But we get this real interesting scene where the Croat is just like clearly he's like does not like Brugal, does not trust Brugal, and is just pointing out all of the things that could go wrong.
Yes.
And all we see is Negan is riding shotgun with him. And by the way, I would just point out, the Escape from New York stuff that you were mentioning before.
Mm-hmm.
Twice now they have shown the Croats people, and some of them are in a yellow cab.
Yep.
I'm just gonna leave that there, right? Okay. I mean, you were talking about stuff that are lifts from that movie. I mean, I have to think now. The first time I'm like, maybe that's just an accident, but now I'm like, no. Now they're channeling Cabby. Now they're definitely referencing that. Yeah. But anyway, so the Croat is very much like he's a slippery eel, and he's just looking to feed himself or whatever he said. And of course Negan's like, well, he wants to talk. Isn't that the important thing? And then finally we get the reveal that the Dama is in the back seat.
Yes.
Right. And she, basically kind of chimes in like the teacher interrupting the students and is like, we can't trust him, but we have to get him. And, we've only won the opening battle and the war's coming and all this, stuff. And so literally they are, and the other thing too, I think the Croats upset that they have to go to Brugal.
Right. They feel like he should come to them.
Yeah. He's like, in the Croats' mind, they hold all the cards. He should come with his hand out, and begging to them.
Right.
And so this does not sit well with him at all. And they get out of the cars, and I think this is where Negan sees the ghoul in the tow truck.
Right.
That ultimately is going to be the ghoul that he chooses to fight in the arena. And and so they all get out, and I think the Dama kind of pulls him aside and goes, look, I really need you to make sure the Croat doesn't fork this up.
Yeah, he's
right.
Yeah, because she says the whole thing about emotions, etc. It's a very emotional time, and she's like, some are more emotional than others, and she's like totally
Yes.
indicating to him, and is basically tells him, just don't, make sure he doesn't fuck this up. Is basically
Right.
She says that point blank. So
she and it's right after like the he walks up to the tow truck, and the ghoul kind of like sits up and like smashes against the window, and it's kind of startling, right? And Negan doesn't flinch at all,
right?
And she's like, wow, nothing ever gets you, surprises you or startles you. And then she kind of builds on that, saying, that's why you're here. I need you to be just as cool as a cucumber as you are right now when we get in there, because Dingbat over there is going to lose it at some point.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And she's not wrong, because I mean the whole scene, it's I gotta say, I loved every second of it.
Yeah.
Kim Coates is just needling the Croat throughout this whole episode.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just making fun of him, ripping on his accent. I mean, it's great,
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, Negan is always there to kind of put out the fire when the Croat kind of erupts a little, and keep things moving, right? Keep the train on the tracks, as it were. And so, but yeah, so they all get out. She kind of passes this little note on to Negan, and then literally Negan's like, well, what do we do? Ring the damn doorbell. And we find out that, we see the Met. And I kind of liked it because it looked to me like it was, probably how like the authorities set up the defenses. Like they decided we want to, preserve the Met.
Right.
And so they had all these metal barricades and obstacles and things in front of it, making it really hard to get up to the front door even, and to me, that I thought that's what was like when the dead rose up way at the very, very beginning. This was like a response of like the New York, police, or maybe the National Guard or something, where they're like, we're going to try and preserve all these, landmarks and the art that's in there, and obviously stop it from being looted and all that kind of stuff, before they realize that, oh wait, the world's ending. They this is kind of their thing. So anyway, I really like that, and one thing that this show has done great for the last 2 seasons is we've gotten lots of great views of New York as the abandoned apocalyptic city, and this was no exception.
Yes, it really did look great, and it's funny because like it wasn't clear, because I've been to New York and I've been to the Met several times, and from the outside I was like, I think that's the Met, I think it is. And it took a little bit more. I was actually, as the painting that he has that makes it clear. And obviously when they're in the cafe, the scene in the cafe where Roxana is like, they're at the museum that's on the edge of the park, and I was like, oh well, that there are a couple of different museums that are near the park. The History Museum, the Night at the Museum, the Natural History Museum, that's right near the park too. Guggenheim and all that, they're all kind of close to it, but the Met is like really right there. So it's
really,
yeah. So they did a good job of describing where it was, doing that, and then an iconic painting that places it at the Met. And now I know that they made it seem like, oh, he's gathered pieces and brought them there, but some of the stuff when they took over the Met they were already there, and that painting is one of them. The Crossing the Delaware. So they did a good job. They showcasing the outside, making sure that was accurate to, like you were saying, they probably did have barricades and stuff like that to make it safe during the fall, and then the inside is accurate to what it actually was in those times.
The outside, it reminded me, it was very similar to, if you remember in the Daryl Dixon show, when we got the flashback to the main bad woman, and she worked at the Louvre,
right?
Remember? And when we get the flashback when like the cops are like putting the barricades up, and they won't let her husband in, they won't let any of them out, and all that. Very same kind of idea, and it's sort of same like energy. Like the authorities kind of have this like action plan when there's like some kind of an emergency like this. and that clearly they felt the Dead Rising falls into, which is insurrection or uprising or whatever. We protect these places, and so
Right.
I agree. I really liked it, and I've never been there, but I knew that it was the one of the big museums in the city,
It's
and
huge.
so as soon as they saw it, that's why I'm like, it's got to be the Met.
Yeah.
That's got to be where they are, and yeah, so that's cool though. I'm glad that they're trying to get at least the geography to kind of line up. That's cool.
Yeah, it's huge. It's kind of like I've been there several times and I still haven't seen the whole museum. It's that big.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
It's really big. They have lots and lots of really crazy collections. So yeah, great choice to have it be at the Met, and with its location right near the park. And since that's like they do call it like the no man's land there, but it's still it's on like a main drag and whatever. It's a good location for them to use. So there's that. So we do have that sort of establishing the Bruegel, and then the establishment of the Damas group showing up to talk to Bruegel, and we get all of that. But we pivot to the cafe, and we have the scene there.
Yes.
And there's this interesting scene where Pearlie and Maggie are talking about Negan, and he's getting some information that I guess he didn't know. He wasn't aware that he thought that the whole time she was there with Negan in the last season that they were in cahoots. And she was just like, she basically was giving him the backstory of like, no. He was a means to an end. I could care less. He killed Herschel's father. Like, I wasn't there for him, and I was fine with trading him at the end so that I could get Herschel. That didn't, like, she's basically like, no regrets,
Yeah.
So
and she's not there to save him or anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So she doesn't have to worry about, and also the underlying thing is, Pearlie doesn't have to worry about Maggie trying to like bust Negan out while they're there. That's not, she could care less. She's not going to do any of that stuff. So, they're basically talking about it because they're getting the information from Herschel about how Negan was there when he was with the other girl that got stabbed by Waylon, the dude that was with the Croat, the Barazzi guy. And so they're getting that whole story from Herschel, and did he say anything? No, he didn't say anything, and blah blah blah, and they're getting all this information. And they basically get this sort of pact together where they're like, okay, well, we need to go and, exert our influence over Negan, and maybe he can help us find out where the methane is. Like, they're using that as like, this is our plan. Like, if we're still going to move ahead with this foolish idea of trying to still get the methane, maybe we can exploit the connection to Negan, and he is in a position to have information. So let's, do that.
Well, and he's their only lead.
Exactly.
So they're like the city's too big to search. We have to find someone who knows where the methane is.
Exactly.
And so literally Pearlie's like, he's the only thing. The only lead we have is to go find Negan and see what he knows.
Yeah.
Because if he's with them, he might know where the methane is, type thing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you're right. And so the three of them, if you will, are kind of in like a back room of the cafe having this little discussion, and I think don't they ask like, was he with the Bugazzi, and Herschel's like, well, he was using one of their spears, so I guess he her, and I kind of like the fact that Herschel at least was answering the questions, because there's been a lot of times in this show where people talk to Herschel and he just kind of stares off into space and does and it's like, dude, will you just answer your mother? But he was telling them what he knew, and also, like you said, Pearlie's kind of learning from Maggie that, there's no love lost between them, and she's not going to go off the reservation and try and, save him or whatever. Right. And so he's like, let's go. And she kind of looks at him like, dude, if how can we go off and talk to Negan? How is that going to sit with everybody here when you're we both wrote down the line, you being the Negan slayer and all.
and she's mainly concerned about Navarez because The other people, maybe they know, maybe they don't. Maybe, we're not sure of how high their level of recruitment is. Are they a soldier? Are they an officer? That's like just under Navarez. Who knows? But she's the one that you have to be nervous about because she, is part of, has put the story together that he took Negan out, and she helped perpetuate that story to other communities. So. Yeah, I love the line, since you being the Negan Slayer and all, it was just like coming from Maggie was hilarious. That was great.
Yeah, it was. It was really funny. And I think too in that scene doesn't Herschel say that, he thinks that Ginny has a gun. Right? Doesn't he share that bit of information to them as well?
I think so. I can't remember, honestly.
Well, because one of the big reveals of this episode is we get a little, and it's not like a state secret. I mean, I was like, oh, good, they're just going to tell us this now. Finally, I didn't actually say it as opposed to just kind of telegraph it. But that we find out why Ginny is has come along on this crazy trip from the very beginning, right? She was supposed to stay back at the Bricks, and she didn't, and and we now learn her true motivation here. And Herschel kind of sets it up by going, I think, she secretly has like a gun with her stuff, and he's like, I think she wants to shoot someone, or she wants to use it on some. Very kind of like it's like, really, you can't figure out who, kid? You don't know? You can't put a name to that? Who she might possibly want to shoot?
Right.
But anyway, that's kind of thrown out there, and Maggie's like, okay, well, let's just keep all this to ourselves for right now.
Right.
So they kind of, you're right, they kind of formed their plan that they're going to, go over to the Met and try and infiltrate and see if they can find Negan and get him alone and kind of pick his brain on where the methane is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. God, that quote, you being the Negan Slayer and all.
Oh, it's so funny.
So they leave it as, they're going to leave Ginny behind. And they, Maggie, not Meggie, Maggie explains to her, why they're leaving. They basically, and, and Pearlie is describing to Navarez, it makes sense because, Herschel and Maggie have experience with with the Barazzi and blah, blah, blah. So they're both making their case for why they're going to leave. And there's that moment where Ginny takes the bag that we know that the thing is in the gun, and she just sort of like hides it under her, puts it behind her, and I'm like, that's not a really good hiding place. Someone's gonna find that.
No. Well, I gotta ask you too. All right, and this was kind of one of my moments of like, really, you think this is a good idea? It's like, okay, Narvaez has already like kind of said like, hey, we should take over these cafe people and like, control this area. And Pearlie had to be like, I don't think so, I'm in command, and finally asserted that he's the guy in charge. And it's like, now you're gonna leave her there with all these soldiers while you go off? It's like, what do you think's gonna happen? I mean, but yeah, so I did that bother you at all? Were you like, that's not a good idea?
I'm more nervous for Ginny than the cafe people. I think Navarez would have a hard time. I think Roxana is tougher than she looks, and I think her people would defend her fiercely. So I'm not so much worried about them. I think she's gonna cause some kind of trouble because she's good at that. But I'm mostly nervous about Ginny being there, and she's got Navarez's gun, and like this. It's just it has a lot of potential to sort of pop off in a bad way. What I mean.
I agree.
Yeah.
If Narvaez finds out that Ginny has her gun, which, surprise, she does. But before that happened, I'm like, that could be really bad. I mean, this woman has no problem hanging people like that, right? We've seen that firsthand, and now someone has stolen her personal property. that could is, but and I think too, doesn't Maggie tell Ginny, I need you to stay here to keep an eye on everything?
Yeah. I'm like, that's a
So
lot to put on her shoulders, you know.
yeah, she's like 14, it's like okay.
Yeah, that
But
doesn't feel
yeah,
right.
anyway,
Yeah.
that I just thought that was a weird choice by Pearlie, where he's like, okay, person who wants to like do whatever she wants and ignore my orders, you're gonna stay here,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, crazy. So speaking of crazy, we head back to the museum for the most grand entrance known to man. As they come inside, and I I love that Brugel's first thing was he says, "I hope traffic wasn't bad," and you're
Oh,
like,
it's so great.
"Oh, it's great." And they have he's grandstanding in such a great way. It's funny because we were talking about Kim Coates's how skilled he is as an actor, that he when he's over the top like this, it doesn't read as like bad acting or too caricature ish, as it were. He's because it's coming from a base of like someone who's really skilled. And a lot of what I get from Bruegel is, and you said the thing about foppish, and I absolutely agree, like there's a lot of that happening. I think when he said the thing about the new money, though, I think how he is in this opening scene, the way he talks, the way he presents himself, is all in a way of like, I don't think, I'm not sure he really cares about like art and things like that. I think he thinks he's supposed to care about those things, and so he paints it on because the Dama is a classy lady, and he knows he needs to appeal, you know what I mean, like be in her league. And I just get this sense that like he'd be much more comfortable at a Yankees game with a hot dog than or like what Negan said about the movie posters, like I just think there's some artifice to the way he was when they walked in. First of all, he doesn't, the other part of the artifice is he doesn't trust any of these people, and I'm not even sure he even likes any of them. Negan, I think he comes around to, but he doesn't know him very well. But like his opening stuff where he's like, welcome, and it's all very grand, and I want to take you on a tour, and all of this other stuff. It feels very like, I'm acting this way because I think I need to. The situation warrants it. The setting warrants it. I want to appear bigger than I actually am, and I will be this way. So I don't know. So it feels very to me, I feel like Bruegel is someone who's sort of painting on some of his character to appear bigger than he actually is. I wonder if Bruegel is even his name.
Yeah, it's probably like like Frank Bruegel.
Yeah, or I mean,
or something.
Yeah, or something like that. But they're in New York. He's got, when he's talking to people and he's in his regular voice, he's got a little bit of a New York like street
a New York
guy.
kind of a talk.
It's not super bad, but it's there. It slides in there, and his bodyguard is a guy named Tony, and da da da. I don't know.
Tony.
It's just got a very like. If you took a guy who was like a mob boss and brought him to the opera, you know what I mean? Like that's the feeling I got. And like I said, not that Kim Coates is painting it on as an actor. I think his character has that layer of that. That's how it plays to me. That's just to me.
Yeah.
But
no, I see it too. I think you're right. I think that and when the Croat refers to him as new money,
right.
That is, it's just, that's what he's giving off, this idea of someone who has been a wannabe his whole life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Didn't come from money, grew up probably in like Six Corners and like knew Daredevil as a kid, and was playing stickball with the rest of the guys, while he was trying to to go through high school and all that, and but dreamed of big things. And now that the apocalypse has happened, he's made his fortune. He's acquired all these things, and just like people that are new money, right? That they're not. I'm just going to use air quotes, born into being rich. They
Right.
just suddenly become rich.
Right.
They when they're around other people who are the generational wealthy type folks, they kind of act, they want to impress, they want to show off, they want to say, look at all the cool stuff I have. And so you get that kind of layer, like you said, of, I'm all about the arts, right? And oh
Yeah.
my God, this museum, I love it so much. And it's like, maybe he really liked the George Washington picture. Maybe he saw it in a textbook or something as a kid or something, but it's like, could he really talk about other art? Does he really know? Is he that, is he an expert? Is, can he
Mm.
talk about all of, probably not, right? And it's just, like you said, it's an act. And like, I also enjoyed how they, like all the exchanges he has in that big, foyer or wherever it is when they first walk in, right?
Hmm.
And it's this massive room and it's like empty, right?
Right.
But everything is like a veiled insult,
Yes. Yep.
seemingly, where like they present they bring in like a couple of like tanks of methane that the Dama is going to like give to him as a, I'm using air quotes, a gift,
Hmm.
right? And what does he say? Like, oh my God, that's enough methane. We could probably light up a light bulb, and it's just, you know what I mean? So even that is kind of a backhanded response, of like, gee, thanks, but again, you're right. It's like almost like that we're not really seeing the real Bruegel yet. We're
Hmm.
seeing this sort of like caricature that he wants us to see.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking too. Um,
Yeah.
and he's very defensive too. Like there,
Mm-hmm.
as soon as Negan's like, you got a lot of mirrors here, and he's like, yeah,
Oh yeah.
it's for the natural
Yeah.
light.
Natural light.
Because we don't
Yeah. Oh
have
yeah.
electricity like you guys.
Electricity would be great.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when he's showing them the Washington painting and talking about it and stuff, or actually before that, when they present the methane, the Croats like kind of puts a dig on him and is like, I know that you guys probably don't know this, but methane highly flammable, so even a match could set it off. And then the Bruegel responds going, well, it's a good thing that none of us are playing with fire.
Yeah.
And then it just comes right back to bite him, because Herschel eventually, to create a, I'm going to use air quotes, distraction,
Yeah.
tips one of the candelabras into the washing pan and sets it on fire, right? And
Mhm.
it's all burning down. But yeah, I mean, it's so many digs and so many, like you said, defensive, like when he's questioned of why he has the museum set up the way that he does, it's almost like, no, you don't get it. It's because of this, because I'm super smart and cultured and I know. And yeah.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. That's totally the feeling. Yes.
and I think, don't they say that Christos used to own
Yes.
the Met, and then he like won it in the Ghoul Arena or whatever?
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't catch that the first time through, and it was the second time through when they were like, "Oh, blah blah blah. You've made changes since Christos was here," and I was like, "Oh, well, yeah, that's interesting because there's a lot of talk about these ghoul matches that he's done lots of betting on, and he's won a lot of things. He's increased his wealth, and the Croat just cannot leave it alone. But the gaining that building is one of the things that he did, and that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And we also get a little, like you said, we get a little insight, because the Croat is very skeptical of how his one ghoul champion keeps winning.
Mm, yeah.
And what does he say? That Bruegel's getting richer, and then all of your competitors are slowly getting poorer.
Right.
Seems a little
It's a little
weird. And then
fishy.
Negan has to kind of step in and go, oh, let's keep moving on. And I have to say that when he asks Negan for his opinion on the Washington painting, right? And Negan kind of goes, I was never a big. I wrote it down. He goes, it's cool, I guess. Never been a big art lover. I'm more of a movie poster kind of guy. And I'm like, the best line of the entire series, ladies and gentlemen, right there,
I feel like that's you. You're a movie
that
poster
is
guy.
Me. I know. I'm a movie poster guy too. So yeah, that was just so cool. And it's just the way, it had just a little bit of the like kind of old Negan like smirk to it. The way he said that line where he, like Negan is literally like, can we just get on with this,
Can we stop talking about the art, please? We've got shit to do, right?
That's right. It's anyway, again, I think it's clear that every scene with Kim Coates in it is super fun and entertaining. And yeah, that right off the bat, like you said, when he walks up to them and goes, I hope the traffic wasn't bad. It's just, you just knew that, okay, this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was no exception with that line with the movie poster kind of
disarming.
thing.
So. He's doing a lot of disarming things to try and like, lighten the mood and whatever, but still be like, I'm still fancy and smart. It's very peacocky. Which yes. Negan should like speaks to like there. You know what I mean?
I think so. Yeah, Negan can certainly relate.
Oh, for sure. So we move back over to the park, and we've got Pearlie and Maggie and Herschel are heading toward the museum. They were told by Roxana that the perimeter has pulled back, and they went to the museum. I love that they've got eyes everywhere. It's fantastic. And so
I also love that Roxana's like, so you guys will be leaving now, right?
And Pearlie was really nice about it. He didn't want there to be any kind of negative feeling. He was just like, can we do this thing and scout out where we need to do, and our people can get their things together and we leave tomorrow? Will that work for you? You know what I mean? He wasn't, because he could have been like, oh, come on, let us stay as long as we want or whatever. He very graciously and very nicely asked for like one more day and gave her the terms of it. And she was like, nods and is like, yeah, I guess.
She's like, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So it's the three of them going through the park, and they're making their way to the Met to see what's up with Negan and the people, and get more information about the methane, right? And they get talking about backgrounds and things like that, and Herschel's confused. He's like, how do you always know where you're going? And then they start talking about how he grew up near here, and he would ditch school and come to the city and blah, blah, blah. And I thought it was such a great moment of, the whole scene was really well done. And the one that hit me was when they were he was talking about ditching school. It's like, yeah, me and my brother, we would pull a fire alarm and, da-da-da-da, whatever. And Herschel's like, what's a fire alarm? And I couldn't help it. I was like, how do you explain that to someone?
It was hilarious because he's like, well, there was a bell, and then Maggie's like, yeah, and you'd pull it,
and she's literally doing the gesture. She's like, you pull it.
Yeah. Oh,
and, yeah. They were like trying to describe the thing by talking about the thing, and I was like, I totally get it if I were in that moment. But it turns into this really great moment where they talk about, things from the before times, and I put the thing about the fire alarm, but I love your note too that you put.
Oh yeah, I mean, this was my favorite scene of the episode.
Oh really? Wow.
As great as Kim Coates was, and he was, man, it was just a joy to watch him just chew all the scenery up. I really like this scene because this scene had a lot of heart to it, and it felt very. It's more of like what I think all of these shows need, which is this sort of, and particularly this one, because all of these idiots want to like rebuild New York the way it was. So I think, we should hear why. What was so great about the old world in the before time that you're going to all these crazy lengths to bring it back. And so after Herschel kind of is puzzling out what a fire alarm is, Pearlie's like, so what's the one food you miss the most from the, the before time? And he says, for me, it's like a breakfast sandwich from like a corner bodega, you know, and
Right.
and you can tell he's like imagining what it tastes like when he's talking about it,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And then Maggie just kind of looks and goes, a jelly donut. And then I'm looking at Herschel, I'm going like, does Herschel even know what a donut
Yeah, no
is?
kidding. And
You
that's
know,
the
I mean,
great thing when they were describing it. The two things that they picked were so far, and then they talk about the Kit Kat bar.
oh
But
yeah, the kid.
the two things that were their first initial thoughts are things that
Hmm.
have no semblance of reality in the apocalypse now. They wouldn't
Right.
know any of those things.
No, no. And yeah, Herschel grew up in a world where like you would have, first of all, explain to him what a bodega is.
Right.
And then second of all, okay, you're having a sandwich for breakfast, and then you have to explain all that stuff, right? And then a donut, okay, oh, and particularly a jelly donut. It's like, okay, imagine like you bake this like bread thing, but it's got a lot of sugar in it, so it's very sweet, and then you like fill it with jelly, you know, and you'd be
You
like, what?
describe it, it sounds disgusting.
Yeah, right, right. You know, but then she goes on to say, you know, she really misses Kit Kat bars, and I'm sure this cost AMC a little bit, but they sing the jingle,
Yep.
which is funny that he starts singing it, and then Maggie chimes right in with the chorus, which
Oh,
was great.
so good.
Um, and then I especially love this is that, you know, Maggie then remembers because he says like, you know, right when the at the very beginning of the outbreak, he said sometimes you could still find a candy bar.
Yeah, at the
And
beginning, yeah,
then
you could.
yeah, and then she goes remembers the last time she got a candy bar, and she goes it was like 3 years
Mm-hmm.
into the end. And then and you can tell she's like the memory is coming back to her, and she just stops talking.
Mm,
And you know, because she's realizing
it's Glenn.
who's in that
Yep.
memory, and then all she says is he surprised me,
Yeah.
and you know it's Glenn.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm like, oh, we almost got a Glenn reference, like an out loud. She almost said his name, you know,
Mm-hmm.
almost. But yeah, and like I said, I love that scene. I thought that scene was really great because it was you know, kind of off the cuff almost, in that he just is like, hey, let's change the subject here and talk about, you know, what's your favorite food you miss,
Mm-hmm.
and which would be something I think people would reminisce about,
Oh, for sure.
you
For
know,
sure.
particularly older people that, you know, are like had enough years in the before time that they know about all this stuff, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, like if I was in that conversation, for me it'd be like, oh my god, French fries.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, oh my God, I miss like McDonald's French fries when you get them and they're really like right out of the fryer and they're hot. Oh my God, there's nothing better, you
Right.
know.
Oh yeah.
You know, and you'd have to think that like, yeah, those are gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you're not, you know, someone might be able to like make them, but they're gonna not be them. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
gonna be like, you know, just potato
Yeah.
wedges that you fried. You know what I mean?
Oh
So,
yeah.
so yeah. So I really, like I said, I really liked that scene. I thought that scene, as small as it was and inconsequential because it had nothing to do with the plot at all, I just really liked that scene.
Yeah. Um. Then we go from that scene to Bruegel's reimagining of the Last Supper scene.
Yep.
Because when they
Yep.
finish looking at the paintings and stuff like that to sort of break the, you know, Bruegel's like, I'm starved. Lunch? Let's go have lunch. Let's have
Lunch?
lunch. You know. So when we
And you forgot when he kept going, Coates.
Coates, yeah.
I'm Coates. I'm Coates.
I'm Coates. Give us your coats. Take your coats. Can we take your coats? Which is hilarious. That is such a like, where's, you know, because only in the fanciest of places would they take your coat for you, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
rather than you just like take it
I-
off and like, you know, when I go to your house, I take it off and throw it on the sofa. I mean, you know.
Oh, I know. Believe me, I know. I also like too. Bruegel at one point is like, he points out because they bring the historian writer guy
Oh
with.
yeah, yeah.
And he's like, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, you know, and so he gets introduced as he's gonna record, and the Dama's like, he's gonna, you know, be writing this down for posterity, and Bruegel's like, I would love to read that when it's done, and she's like, no, it's more just for like, you know, posterity's sake, and he goes, oh right, I understand, a moral tale, and then he goes, Thermopylae. That to me is just another example of him trying to be like, see, I'm educated educated. I know stuff. I'm not this like, guy from the streets here. It seemed very forced,
Yeah.
but great,
But yeah, it was very well done there. But the laying out of the way they were sitting is so Last Supper.
Oh God, yeah.
And the thing is that because of how they have played Bruegel and how Kim Coates is approaching Bruegel as, the new money guy, the guy that's like trying too hard, it works so well, the placement of everybody at the table and all of that stuff. And I just think it's just really, really well done. It looks great, and I think it was a really great choice for them to do it that way. And it's great because here's this this whole Last Supper setup, and it's really, in their case, they're doing it's more practical because it's a really long table and they've got a cage set up so they can have like a little, Walker cage match for, mid-lunch, entertainment, as it were. And he calls it and when they were on their way to go have lunch, that's where the title of the episode comes from. We're going to have like a little exhibition match, a feisty friendly, as it were.
A feisty friendly,
and so no stakes, but we'll still have my champion against another regular Walker. But yeah, just the imagery of the Last Supper with the long table. So beautiful.
I
so
mean,
well done.
how could you miss it? I mean, it's just like, wow, oh my God, and I'm like freeze framing and I'm counting how many people are sitting at the table, and it was incredibly well staged. And you're right. I mean, there is a practical side to it because they're all literally like overlooking the cage match that's going to be going on in front of them there. And I also love too that the first course that they are served is like rat kebabs, right? And I'm like, Bruegel's like cooks, like they can't even be bothered to like cut the heads off the rats, or like even like fillet them. I mean, it's like they like skinned them and like barbecued them and brought them out, so they still have their little arms and feet and tails under there. I was like, oh my God, how disgusting! But at the same time, I'm sure that's like a delicacy for them.
Well, yeah, and on top of it too, like in these trying times of being able to get a lot of meat, I'm sure that's difficult, but why would you cut off the head? That's more meat that you can have. That's more. I mean, you and I are grossed out by that, but they probably like, we're giving you the most succulent of rats. We're giving you the extra stuff.
No. Look, you can serve the fish with the head on. That's weird, but acceptable. But any other animal, head's got to go, man. You don't bring a chicken sandwich out with the head on there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I definitely had some flashback moments to Demolition Man, the Stallone movie from the early 90s, where they go into the sewers at one point chasing after Wesley Snipes' character, and the sewer people are barbecuing up these burgers. And of course, Stallone has been, they all eat the terrible food. I think the only restaurant that's left in Demolition Man is Taco Bell. And so they have to go to Thai. So and he's just jonesing for like some, food from his time, and he's like, oh my God, a burger, and he starts eating it, and Sandra Bullock is like, John Spartan, do you see any cows around here? And he's like, it's a rat. And the person grilling goes, and he's like, it's good. so yeah, I definitely had little flashback moments of that, but it makes total sense that they would eat rats. Why not? Everything's a resource here.
Oh yeah.
But it's like, oh come on, man. At least cut the head off, right? At least cut the head off. Come on, But and what was the other thing? It was like a big carrot, right?
Yeah, and it still had like the tip of the carrot on there, like the green nub at the end and everything.
Oh yeah.
So it's like it's and I love it because the Dama doesn't have any of it at first, and Negan's like, oh, not a fan of rat, and he's jonesing her. He's like jibing at her. And she's like, oh, I'm waiting for the next course. And it's going to be like raccoon pauvoir is what she is.
Oh,
like,
I know.
Oh, my God. And I just had an image of what that would look like on the plate. And I don't know if she's
Mhm.
serious or if she's poking fun in that moment, but it's hilarious. It's really well done.
See, but I think that's the great part about that line is that you can't tell if
Right.
she's just making a funny or if she's like, oh no, they're gonna bring friggin' raccoons out here in a minute, okay?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was great, and I think doesn't that spur the historian to finally put two and two together and figure out who she is?
Yes, yeah. Her whole demeanor and how she's in that moment she's being critical, and
Hmm.
he her face and everything, it clicks for
It
him,
it clicks,
and
yeah.
he's been like reading up on New York as a city and what it has to offer, and I'm sure that what's probably happened is he probably has access to like an incomplete set of like encyclopedias or something like that, and that's where he's learning all of these different things about the time before, and so he's getting like a basic understanding and knowledge of certain things. But he did say that in his research there were some newspapers that were available here and
Hmm.
there, and usually when someone was had like an editorial or a byline, or they had like a regular column at a newspaper, usually they would have like either like a drawing of what their face looked like, or there'd be a photo there or whatever. It would just be, like, blah, blah, blah article by, John
Hmm.
Smith. And there'd be a little picture of John Smith right there at the top of the article. And that's
Yeah,
what,
a little
yeah.
headshot.
And that's what he said he saw, was he had access to all these different newspapers, and he was reading all these things, and he read a bunch of theater reviews, and he's like, that's who you are. She was the main theater critic
Hmm.
for during those times. And it's funny because she seems, and it's, I don't know if it's just me, but she seems kind of uncomfortable with
Oh God,
with
yeah.
being found out.
Hmm.
um and so I don't know if that's gonna bode well or bad for Mr. Pierce, but
Yeah, I had the same thing. Like, kid, you should
yeah,
stop
stop
talking
talking right
because
now.
she is giving you the death look right
And it's funny
now.
because he clocks it for a second, because he remembers the story that he tells.
Hmm.
Oh, and then there was
Hmm.
this story or whatever, and he sees and he holds back. And then Negan's like,
And
well, now I got to hear the story.
yeah, and he's like, "Come on, kid, let's go.
Yes.
What's the
So he sort
story?"
of
Yeah.
half-heartedly tells the story, and there's this story from the before times where there was an altercation at a show one night, and and basically the details aren't important. The important thing is that she bites someone.
I loved
Was
it.
she, did it say she bit them in the ear, or just that she bit
No,
them?
she just said that she bit him.
Okay.
Yeah, but what he tells is that first of all he sets it up by saying she was like the critic
Mm-hmm.
and she could make or break people's careers in the New York theater, environment. I mean, everyone looked to her to, do we like this? Do we not like that? That kind of thing. And then the altercation is this man wrote a play kind of making fun of her, and it was called like The Little Empress
That's
or
right. That's
something,
right.
right? And so I mean it was calling her out, and Negan of course is just egging this kid on, right? And he's like, sounds like a hit to me, and the kid's like, oh yeah, it was a big hit, and she is just like turning on like five shades of red at this point, and is just like literally giving him the look of like, shut the hell up, and then he goes, and so at either the opening or at some point there was an altercation, and he like can't like quite say what it is that happened, and finally she's like, and I bit him.
It's such a great
Oh,
moment. Oh my god. And it's,
oh well,
and
yeah,
I,
go ahead.
when I was like, was it on the ear, or did she just say she bit him? I'm of course ascribing Mike Tyson tendencies to this poor woman,
Sure.
you know. Um, but yeah, that's, she seems she seems kind of like the way she carries herself. She's got kind of like that fancy but timid, like, because she's kind of thin, like rail thin. She gives off this real like kind of frailness to her. So
Hmm.
picturing her being aggressive in any way like that is so weird. You know what I mean? Because she also is in a place now where she has people do her dirty work. I mean, yes, she did slice the throat of Victor, but, you know, it wasn't like she had to, you know, like hold him down or anything like that. He was just sitting right there and she did it, you know? So, I don't know, like, she's, other than that one moment with Victor, she seems really kind of, not timid, but just like, she has other people do her dirty work. So, for her to be the person who bit someone else is just, it just shows that she's got like an undercurrent that we probably haven't seen 100% of yet. So.
Yeah, I mean, for what I took away from it is that, you know, she has this like out exterior demeanor of calm and controlled, and everything is, you know, under, you know, like she's not showing lots of emotion and so on, but at any moment she can erupt and crazy can come out.
Right.
And and we saw that with Victor, you know, a couple episodes ago,
Right.
but now we're getting evidence that, oh yeah, she was like this in the before time, right? You know, before all this stuff happened. But I just love the fact that we're now in a world where the dead are literally biting all the living, and yet this woman, before that even started, she was biting people. I just think it's just lovely irony.
It is,
you know,
it is.
Yeah. Again, a wonderful little scene. It has absolutely nothing to do with this episode. We'll see if it's going to tie in later. You know, is she going to, you know, lose her cool down the road here? But yeah, this was my second favorite scene was when that poor kid kind of finally spilled the beans on the Dama. It was great. It was, and I could tell too that Jeffrey D. Morgan was having a ball playing that scene too.
Oh God, yeah. So while they're having lunch, obviously the ghoul fighting is happening right in front of them as well. So let's talk a little bit about that, because you made a note about the ghoul fighting and that you don't get it, and I'm with you.
Yeah. You know, like when we first saw it in either episode 1 or 2, you know, when the Croat and Negan were like looking through their binoculars at them fighting, right? I didn't understand. I'm like, why would a ghoul attack another ghoul? First of all, that's the thing that I just didn't get, because they don't, you know, they walk around next to each other all the time and they don't attack. And so that seemed weird. And I appreciate that they tried to explain that they like, you know, take like blood and guts and like rub it on the back of their heads to kind of attract them. And I would point out that has to be like human blood and guts. That can't be Walker stuff. That has to be people that were killed but didn't turn.
Right, because if it was Walker stuff, it would mask them.
They wouldn't care. Yeah. So that's one thing you got to keep in mind, that somewhere they're bumping off people, you know, and then killing, you know, decapitating them or whatever before they can turn. So they have this chum to use. Right. And then, you know, like we said before, you know, the ghouls in the fight have these like headpieces with all kinds of spikes on them. And the idea is when they go to bite the back of the head, which has the blood and the guts on it, the spikes are going to go and penetrate the skull and destroy the brain. And that's how you determine a winner, right? Is that it puts down the other ghoul. Right. And my thing is like, you know, you could have a ghoul fight that could take like days.
Yeah.
Before one of them gets a lucky shot like that. And it just seems very ungainly, very, you know, I mean, it's very much like in the writer's room, someone came up with this idea and they're like, oh my God, that's going to look awesome. Yeah. And they didn't really manage to, or bother to kind of like think it all through.
Yeah.
And, you know, because like, don't get me wrong, I totally get the idea of, you know, you have the ring and you have a human fighting the ghouls, and we've seen that, or some iterations of that in the past. You know, and you could even have like, you know, like Tony is like, you know, the gladiator, right? So he's all armored up and he's well trained and well cared for and, you know, is well known, and the people come and they cheer for him and all that. And is he going to die? No, probably not, you know, because he's a huge investment. And, you know, just like in ancient Rome, you know, the gladiators rarely got killed in the ring because they were too expensive. You know, that's not, they were there. But then you would also be like, hey, for tonight's entertainment, we caught these 3 guys trying to steal food from us. And so now they're going to fight 30 ghouls and all they get is a penknife, and then boom. And then you're watching these guys run for their life. That I think could have worked and been totally cool and much more, I think, believable. But the whole setup of it, to me, I'm just kind of like, man, you could have a ghoul fight that could last for like hours and hours and hours, and you'd be bored out of your mind.
Right.
I mean, what's your thoughts on this? Do you like this? Do you not like this?
I think from the moment we were introduced to it, in the the first sort of like, there's Bruegel and he does these little fights, and the Croat brought Negan along, right? In that first episode, it's been problematic because they're billing it, we learn like I'm using air quotes here, the secret truth behind the fights, but before we learn the secret truth, it's being billed as 2 ghouls fighting each other, and that doesn't make sense in any zombie universe.
I know, right?
It doesn't have to just be a Walking Dead universe of rules. Like, it just doesn't make sense. You've never really seen that happen. So I didn't understand, like, what's the motivation for them to be fighting? Now I didn't really think about I had like sort of like a thing in the back of my head about the Daryl Dixon of it all, with they shot up the ghouls over in France and made them into like super ghouls, but I don't remember them being aggressive towards other ghouls in that way. Were they? I don't remember that.
Remember they did, because like when they got in the car and all the regular ghouls were like around the car and they couldn't get out, and then like 2 of the super ghouls showed up and just eviscerated all the regular ghouls. But that's a weird one-off kind of we got this chemical that we're going to shoot them up with. And I think that's what the Croat accused Bruegel of doing with his champion.
Yeah, and I can see him, like, if you didn't know anything else, like maybe he did shoot them up with something. Like, that's an interesting idea for the Croat to go down that road. So at first I was like, oh, well, maybe that's it. Maybe it is like maybe he's been messing around with science. He's trying to figure out the methane thing, and that has a big like sort of scientific edge to it. So maybe he's got somebody in a lab somewhere who's messing with whatever. And but until the Croat said that in this episode, everything leading up to it makes no sense.
Making zero sense. Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't fit in the world. Now that we know that Tony was just a slow-moving human, it makes a little more sense, because Tony has human instinct to go after the ghoul and do as he's told, and the ghoul has the instinct to go after a living person, so that makes it all make sense after the fact, but nobody else knows that. So I don't understand. That's the part I don't get. Like, how are the other people that are around accepting this as like, we've been in the apocalypse for 15 years and I've never seen 2 ghouls fight each other, but this makes sense.
Well, what for me the thing is, how has no one, Christos or anyone, figured out that Tony's not a ghoul? That's the thing. I mean, if I'm betting like my house, which is the Met, in a match, I'm gonna make damn sure the other side isn't cheating. Right. And so I'm going to be inspecting the ghoul very closely. And you'd think you'd figure out, hey, this guy looks pretty alive for a ghoul, Yeah. And like the whole, like the big reveal at the end, that, oh, Tony was alive all the time, or when Negan figures it out or whatever. To me, I figured it out when because there's a fight that happens before the fight with the ghoul with the motor oil.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll just call him Frankenstein, because that's what they kept referring to Tony as. And he's huge, right? He's much bigger than most of the other ghouls that we see. There's a scene in there where he the other ghoul is coming, like he misses him, and the other ghoul is coming up behind him and is going to like get a kill shot in his head, and he like ducks out of the way from behind. You know what I mean? The ghoul's coming from behind him, and he has the reflexes and sense enough to move out of the way like real quick, right before the death blow comes in. And I think the Croat even noticed that as like, wow, I've never seen a ghoul do that before. And when I saw that, I'm like, well, that guy, that's clearly a person, because the way he reacted was like a human would react, like you or I would react.
Right.
That's not what a ghoul would do. A ghoul would be completely oblivious to the other guy coming up behind you like that. You know what I mean? And so that was for me when the cat was out of the bag, that I'm like, okay, well, obviously and they'd made a big deal up to that point of saying, man, your champion's won like 26 times in a row. And how is it that he never loses and all that? So I'm like, okay, well, that's how. I get it. Understand. But the whole concept of the ghoul fight just makes no sense to me, just I think like it does to you, that based on the rules of this universe, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So
yeah.
And it's a shame because like I like the idea of like Brugal having these like sort of gladiatorial combat things. I like that as like a motif or whatever. I just, by using ghouls, for it to be two ghouls in the thing, it takes you out of the scene. It makes you go, oh, well, the rules aren't being applied appropriately here. And like you said, we've seen other scenes where it's like a person against, like the Daryl stuff. It was Daryl against like the souped up walkers and stuff like that. So I could understand that, if you put a prisoner in there or something like that.
Yeah.
But
well, and that's straight out of Rome, in the Roman times when they would have the big gladiatorial games, in the Colosseum, they would literally empty out the prisons and like the insane asylums and stuff, and just they would tell all the prisoners, hey, you know what? The 30 of you guys are gonna go into the ring, and whoever survives, the one person who's left, get to go free.
Yeah.
And then they would bring in, lions and stuff, and suddenly they'd be fighting the lion. You know what I mean? So it was all spectacle, so the fans could watch people get ripped to shreds, because that was exciting and different, and so on. But and like I said, if they would have gone that route, I would have loved every second of it, because I get it, that makes sense. Like I said, oh, we caught these guys and they were, trying to, steal something, or they were trying to kill someone, or this guy, he cheated on his wife and she decided his punishment. Boom, he has to fight, 15 female walkers or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just you could have a lot of fun with it and really play it up and make it very cartoony and fantastic, but the rules would still apply, and you're like, yeah, okay, you know what? Those 15 female ghouls are gonna try and kill him because that's what they do.
Right. Yeah. So in essence, the gladiator stuff, good idea, especially for it fits Brugal's character. It fits a lot of other things, a lot of elements that are happening right there, but just the nuts and bolts of the actual fights themselves just don't make sense.
Yeah. And this was the big turnoff for me in this whole episode. This was the one part that I'm kind of like, I don't really like this part.
Yeah, I agree.
But Kim Coates is really good at reducing bad writing stink, and he is a really good deodorant, because like I said, I really like this episode despite this whole thing that I just don't think is a good idea.
Yeah.
So
I agree that there was like a couple other tiny things that I had issues with, which we're gonna get to. But yeah, I agree. It was it takes you out a little bit, even though I like a lot of the machinations around it and the idea of the gladiator fight to begin with.
Yeah, I do too. Absolutely. I'm right there in lockstep with you. Great idea, bad execution.
We move away from the Met for just a small scene, but a really, really impactful scene back at the cafe. We have this really great scene between Ginny and Everez, and what I put in my notes is I said, finally, it's the Navarez scene that we've been waiting for. Because you and I have said, leading up to this episode, Dasha Polanco is really, really talented. She's brought a certain flavor and charm and really good acting skills to other projects. And so far, I just feel like her character hadn't been written correctly, or she just wasn't, like, something wasn't connecting. She's great, but the way that, Navarez has been written and the scenes she's been in have just been so, like, stilted and weird, and it felt weird coming out of her mouth and whatever. And then finally we get this scene where Ginny comes upon Navarez, has her bag, and Navarez has found the gun. Because Ginny so expertly hid the bag on the side of her bed where everybody could see her.
Yes, she did.
So there's this moment, and at first it's played really well, because the only action that Navarez does the whole scene is she empties out the bullets in the chamber, empties everything out of the gun. She cleans it a little bit and then reloads it, and then it's finished. But when she first starts handling the gun and is cleaning it, there's some fear there, because you don't know what she's going to do. She's going to be angry at Ginny. What is Ginny doing with her gun? And then she starts relating that the gun itself was a gift from the Governor Boyd. And so,
the late
Governor Boyd, who apparently was someone that
I think it's Bird.
Bird. You maybe that's correct. It's Bird with like the Y in it. So my brain
B-Y. Yeah.
So my brain remembered it as Boyd.
So you're from
yes,
Boston.
I know. I'm stupid. So there's, but it's clear that there is some I don't want to call it hero worship, but there's definitely a lot of respect that Navarez had for Governor Bird, that there was this was someone that she looked up to, that was a mentor in a lot of ways. And it became clear in this scene how important the governor was to her. And she's telling this story, and she said that the thing that is most important that the Governor Bird taught her is about the rule of law, and that and that's important in these days when everything's sort of like, survival of the fittest and all of that. To maintain a rule of laws was very important to her, and she instilled that in Navarez, and Navarez agrees, and that's the way she keeps her life, is that there's a certain amount of retribution. There needs to be justice in this world for things, exactly. And before she had told this story, she asked why Ginny was with them. And she said, "I'm here because I'm going to kill the man who killed my father." And Navarez launches into the story. And at the end, when she gets to the point where she says, justice is important, and the rule of law, and making people pay for the things that they do, and she finishes with the gun and turns it so that it's facing toward Ginny again, and just gently pushes it to her, basically to say, "I approve of your mission. I was gifted this gun, and I have an opportunity here, and I am gifting it to you to use in your quest to kill this person who clearly wronged you." And it's almost like this sort of seal of approval. And it's amazing. The way she sort of holds that whole scene in the palm of her hand, the way it starts out really kind of menacing because you don't know where she's going to go, and then it has some heart and some substance, and then it ends on a really great note. And Ginny has the gun, and she takes it, and she goes to leave, and she's like, "The person you're looking for is still on the island." And she starts to leave, and she's like, "Their name wouldn't be Negan, would it?" And Ginny's like, has like a "oh fudge" look on her face, like
she's like hamina.
And that's the scene. And I really, really liked the scene. What did you think of the scene with Navarez and Ginny?
I really wish they could go back and cut out all of the scenes of Navarez before this one, and so this would be the first time we ever meet her, because before it was a cardboard cutout moving around saying all those horrible lines, and this was a great scene. where she wasn't, at least it didn't seem to be incompetent. She didn't seem to be someone who like, I'm a major, and just like, I have a uniform and everything,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's like, no, I mean, um, so yeah, I really like this scene. And the fact that, like you said, when Ginny sees that she's found the gun, Ginny's kind of like, uh-oh, this is could be bad, right? They might be looking for a tree outside to string me up on, And the fact that she's just very, very calm, he's like, why are you here? It's clearly not for New Babylon.
Yeah.
You don't give a crap about
Yeah.
us. And Ginny, I think, does the right thing, is very truthful, and like you said, I'm here to kill the guy that killed my father. And then yeah, she does a great speech story about how she has been taught by the New Babylonian folks that there are rules and there are crimes and things that are done to us that require retribution. And she says retribution and justice. uh and and again, the whole time she's cleaning the gun, and I love when she takes the clip out and then she pulls back the hammer, and the round that's chambered comes out and she catches it, right? Which is a really cool little pro move. And then she takes the gun apart and she kind of cleans it all up and she reassembles it, puts the clip back in, and gives her the gun, and essentially is saying, you do what you got to do, kid, because it's important and it's right. And by giving you this gun, I'm kind of paying forward what the governor did to me all those years ago when I first showed up. And what did she say? Like, she was from Jacksonville, Florida or something.
Yeah.
And when she got to New York, she was basically an animal, right? And they took her in and cleaned her up and all this stuff. And so now this is kind of like, I took it as her way of sort of like, I'm paying that forward, that act of kindness, by encouraging you to go out and shoot someone in cold blood. So yeah, I like this scene too. This was my third favorite scene of this episode. So and again, like you said, it's a small little scene. And in terms of the plot of this episode, it really had nothing to do with it.
Right.
I mean, you could have not had this scene in this episode and you would have been fine. But it's setting us up for, episodes down the road here. So, and the fact that, like you said, she kind of goes, by the way, this guy you're trying to kill, his name wouldn't happen to be Negan, would it? Yeah. So it's going to be interesting when Pearlie gets back to see, where his standing is.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, he is the Negan Slayer and all.
He is the Negan Slayer. So we get, this is the part of the show that I had some issues with. Was
I guess you did, because you got like 5 notes about it.
Well, not the, where am I in my notes? They have,
I think it's number 10.
Yeah. So where Maggie and Pearlie and Herschel are sort of watching the entrance of the to the Met. They realize, there's no, the Brugazi that are outside, the soldiers and whatever, they don't care about the actual building. They're mostly guarding the cars. So that means that the Met is not the location where the methane is. No meth.
So you're saying the meth is not at the Met?
Meth is not at the Met. So yes. Wow. But they do know that...
You're saying it's a myth that the meth is at the Met.
That's correct. But they do know that Negan is there, so they're figuring, let's go try and find him, and we'll try and suss this out. Like, we'll create a, and Herschel's right there. It's like, I can create some kind of a diversion, and you can try and seek him out and talk to him. And they're like, great, this is a great plan. I'm like, oh, it's a terrible plan. So they go inside.
Well,
go ahead.
And Maggie goes, I know how to draw him out.
Yeah. They have that.
And she's like, I hate it, but I know.
Yeah, I've got a way. So basically, what goes down is they're all jibber jabbering in the lunchroom area with the ring, and someone comes running in. Oh my god, come! And what they did was Herschel tipped one of the candelabras into the painting that he had just been looking at, the one of Washington crossing the Delaware.
Yeah.
And everybody runs in, and it's all this big emotional scene. And he's like, "Oh my God, put it out! Throw yourselves at it!" The drama in this scene was hilarious.
It was so great. He's like, "Throw yourself into it!
Like,
Come
do
on!
whatever you can.
Had it!"
So that whole scene was just fantastic, but it does leave Negan alone. Negan follows them there, and they're all in the room. And he's towards the back of the room, and nobody pays any attention to this, but really quietly he can hear someone's doing the Negan whistle. That his little savior whistle that he would do. And everybody else is kind of further into the room, so they probably wouldn't have. And even if they did clock it, it just, to them, would sound like somebody whistling. And he's like, "I know that whistle.
Well,
that's my whistle."
The only one who could know could be the Croat.
Right. And he's a little too far into the room to have even heard it, you know?
Yeah, well, it's because the Croat's busy giving Bruegel crap, because he's like, "Oh, I guess some of us are playing with fire."
And after having to sit through that lunch where he did nothing but take crap from his guys, he's enjoying this a lot.
Yes, yeah, and we should point out too that before the fire starts, the Bruegel gets up, and he, the first gladiator fight is over, and he's like basically saying this is a momentous occasion because we're going to cement our alliance, and it's going to be so great. And he tells the story about Tony, his bodyguard, and that taught him service. And he's like, "And that's what this is, because I'm going to serve you." And he points right at the Dama. And then he goes, "I have one teeny tiny little addendum I'd like to make to our alliance." And he basically says, "I think what would be really great is if we set up another methane factory here.
Yeah.
And then we can double the methane," right? And the Croat just loses his shirt and is like, "Absolutely not," and blah, 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 And Negan, again, because the Dama is like giving Negan, like, the killer eyes, like, do something, right? Because this whole deal is like going to fall apart. Right. Because the Croat and Bruegel are really starting to get nasty to each other. And so Negan's like, "I tell you what, we'll have one more fight, and you can have your Frankenstein fight, and then we'll pick our own guy, and if you win, you get the methane, and if we win, you do the alliance without it." Right? And so Bruegel's like, "Yeah, cool." And so that's why Negan goes outside, because they go out to that tow truck and they open the door and they take that ghoul that's been in the tow truck for, I don't know, 15 years or whatever. And that's the guy, that's going to be their contestant, right? And so they go back in, and I believe they're like getting ready to do the fight when suddenly someone runs in and is like, "Oh my God, the painting's on fire," right? And so now they all run into the other room where the painting is, and that's when Maggie does the whistling, and Negan is like, "Oh, okay," and he starts trying to get away, and the Dama's like, "Where are you going?" And he's like, "The little boy's room, because like Rat just goes like right through me." And she kind of like looks at him like, "Ew, that's gross," and then turns back to watching the painting. So I guess this is one time where she was fooled, right? Normally she sees through that kind of stuff, you would think. But anyway, yeah, so he leaves and goes into another room where Maggie is, and we finally, 4 episodes in, we finally have the two leads of the show in the same scene.
Yeah. And his first reaction is, "Maggie? Why are you here?" and she's basically like, "I'm not here for you." I'm making it real clear. I'm not here to like save you or whatever. And she comes clean right away. She's like, "I need to know where the methane is. That's the only reason we're here." She's like, and then after a few minutes, like Pearly shows himself up above. And is basically, and then he gets it. He's like, "Oh, I get it. You joined the cause," meaning she joined.
You're on the payroll.
And
that's what he says.
And so, and Pearlie's like, "Listen, it'll go to good people. They deserve it. They'll, blah blah blah." And he's like, "I can't." He's like, "I can't for the people that I'm trying to protect." And basically, the entire time over these last few episodes, every time something, even when Negan does something good and pleases the Dama, she makes a pointed comment
Oh
about
my God.
Annie and
Your
Josh. Your
family
would
would be so
proud. Yeah,
proud. Oh, God.
just like, don't get too ahead of yourself. Don't think that
Mm-hmm.
you're becoming like important or anything like that. You are still a prisoner and you're doing my bidding.
Just remember.
Yeah. So
yeah. Just remember who's in charge.
And she just recently made the same comments, and as they were on their way into the, she's making sure he's always reminded that, Annie and Joshua are on their way and they're going to love seeing you. And we're bringing them here, under, they're being held at gunpoint, I'm sure. So
right.
he's, Maggie and Pearlie make their pitch and he's like, I can't. I really, really can't. Because, he's like, I'm trying to keep my people safe too. And then Maggie's like, oh, Annie and Joshua.
Oh.
So it's clear that like something's happened and they are being held over his head. And I know Maggie was a part of trying to help get them away so that he wouldn't have to, so they couldn't be used against him, and so that they would be safer, like farther away. And so she didn't know they'd been intercepted. She didn't know anything about that, and she seems genuinely sad for him. Like in that moment, she's got some empathy in that quick moment. And then, then he's like, you have to get out, you can hear them starting to come back into the room. They're heading towards, and he's, you gotta go. And as she's about to leave, he's like, St. Patrick's Cathedral, 35th and 5th, 50th and 5th, or whatever the address is. And she's like, so basically that's where the methane is at the cathedral, or that's what he's saying it is. And so she goes to get away, and then everybody comes in the room, and then she does the stupidest like try to get away known to man. And she's in that sort of like upper like exhibit area, like that was looking down upon the room that they were in. Pearlie had just been up there, and she sent him away and was like, I'll meet you guys at the rendezvous point. You go, I'll stay here. So that Negan could speak freely. So she goes through that same area that's up above, and she does this stupid like thing where she's like, I'm gonna look, nobody's looking. Okay, I'm gonna go behind this pole. I'm gonna look, no one's looking, I'm gonna go behind this pole. And there's these big windows behind you. So someone's gonna see something out of the corner of their eye, and the Croat looks up like 2 to 3 times, because like, there's a dark figure passing in front of this bright window. Why didn't she lay down on the floor and like crawl across it? Nobody would have seen her.
No, see, you can't use logic. You can't use logic when you're doing these kind of shows, because you're right. It makes total sense, but no.
And then when she finally, and meanwhile, this, this other ghoul battle has started. This one that they're making this bet on. And Negan can see she's trying to get out, and he doesn't want her to be seen, and so, and also he wants to turn the tide on this match, and so he jumps into the ring, and I'm like, oh my God.
But see, before that though, because they pour all this motor oil on his ghoul. And so he's going to be all slick and slippery. And basically Negan is using the idea of, Frankenstein is this massive kind of lumbering, slow, powerful fighter. So my guy is smaller and faster, and if we grease him all up, he's going to be real slippery, right? And so he's and it kind of works. And Frankenstein gets in a real vulnerable position, and like the other ghoul is like kind of closing in and looks like it might, kill him.
Right.
And so Bruegel like rolls his sleeve up and sticks his arm over the fence, and it's like, hey, here, come over here.
Come to lunch.
And Yeah, and Negan's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And Brugel points out the rules are that the humans can't have no physical contact with the ghouls in the arena. So he's like, "I'm not violating the rules," although clearly it's the spirit of the rule.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's cheating, But so now then, that distracts the ghoul, and so Frankenstein's able to recover, and so the fight continues, and that's when Negan sees Maggie up there, and so then he kind of takes the page out of Brugel's book, and you're right, he literally jumps into the ring,
Yeah.
and he's like kind of like sidestepping the ghouls as they come towards him and moving out of the way, and technically, he never touches them,
Right.
right? So no physical contact, but yeah, again, it's clearly it's a twofold thing. It's one to help ensure the fight that
Yes.
it's going to go his way, but it's also so people will be distracted and not look at Maggie very obviously walking across that that upper
Yeah.
level. And I think the Croat like almost sees her.
Yes.
Right. And so, Negan kind of sees him almost see her and is like, uh-oh, this ain't good. And so he's trying to help her. Yeah. And then she gets like almost across, and then she sees the Dama.
And the Dama sees her.
Oh, she does. She
Yeah.
absolutely does. But I mean, she freezes when because this is like, holy crap, this is the woman that's in the picture
Mhm.
that Herschel drew. And again, she's kind of been getting little bits and clues that Herschel's been lying to her a lot.
And Negan
You
had
know?
just said that too. He gave her
Yeah.
one of his parting things. He gave her the information about the methane, but also, and I forgot to include this, he makes the comment where he's like, "Hey, Herschel, don't trust him. He's involved
Yeah.
somehow." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" Like, "No, he's not." And she's
Yeah.
like, "He sent the signal. He did.
Yeah, he says something like, she somehow has got
has
control
gotten to
over him.
somehow." Yeah.
And he and Maggie, who is she? And then he's literally like, you can't trust him, and then that's it, because people are coming back and they got to go. They don't. It's like the conversation is kind of interrupted.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then she sees the Dama, and so yeah, you're right. She just flat out freezes and is just sort of like, what?
'Cause-
And the Dama just kind of looks up at her and is just like, oh hey,
Yeah, she's
what's
amused
up?
by the whole thing.
know?
And it's funny too, because the only information that Maggie has, there's that picture that he drew, is what Herschel said. Like we said, he said, "This is just someone that I saw. That this isn't anybody important at all." And now Maggie knows she just came from Negan saying that stuff. She suspects Herschel already because of the blue material thing.
The blue thing,
So she
right?
suspects-
So she's pretty much sure he set the signal fire.
Yeah, so she's got some issues with all of that stuff, and then to see the Dama in the flesh and know that is not just someone he saw on the street, that this is someone important, and probably connects to the thing that Negan just said. Oh, she got to him. Well, this has to be the she. Oh my God. And this is, so she takes a lot of information in right then and there. And it's tough. 'Cause but I still feel like the fact that the Dama, because the Dama also has a scene where she sees Herschel
Herschel's what?
While Maggie has Negan, and the stuff is going on with the fire, Herschel's getting away. He gets turned around in the museum, and he's walking down a hallway and looks into one of the galleries, and it's the Dama by herself. And oh my God. So the Dama gets,
and she's like, hey, how are you?
And so the Dama sees both Herschel and Maggie, but doesn't say anything about it. I just felt like it felt a little weird in that moment. She sort of was like relishing that moment to herself. The thing is that, do you think she's going to make a connection there, and is Negan going to suffer because of it? You wonder.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I see. It didn't really bother me as much that she didn't say anything, because she is, always trying to be one step ahead, right? And she even says that in this episode when it comes to Brugel, that they need to they need to play nice. They need to get this alliance in place because they need his men and him to fight the war.
Right.
But she said, literally says, we need to stay one step ahead of him. And so she sees Maggie, she sees Herschel, so she knows they're there.
Mm-hmm.
She then probably puts it together. That's why Negan didn't fire the cannons right away.
Right.
When on the boat, because, you know, she just knew that it was a kid getting in the boat. Well, obviously it was Herschel, and so she's kind of putting all this information into her memory bank and kind of trying to calculate what, you know, okay, Negan, clearly something's up with him. I can't trust him as much as I would like to, or what, you know what I mean? And so she's like forming plans based on this information and is going to use it at the opportune moment, right? Yeah. And so that it made total sense to me that's what she would not be like, oh my God, there's Maggie, you know, when she sees her, true. Right? I mean, she'd be much more like, oh, well, that's an interesting piece of information, and I will bring this up at the most inopportune time for Negan.
I think to me too, the problem that I had with the scene too is also, you know, she learned from the best. Rick would always have a plan, and it would just be like, and it just never works the way you want it to at all. But I feel like just her plan was kind of okay, but then, you know, after that, like the crossing up above and being seen and all that other stuff, like it just felt like Maggie's better than that. Like Maggie knows better than that and would get out. So it just felt weird for like Maggie to have even been in that situation, to have made some of those choices. And that's something we've had a problem with so far, is like there's been a couple of like, oh, would they really make that choice? Would they really do that? And this is some of the stuff, the elements of the things that Maggie was doing felt like it didn't make sense, like not for her character. She's way smarter than that. So I just feel
it would have been nice if they would have shown had a scene of Maggie crossing that level, looking down on them to get to Negan, so we knew that like that was the route she had to take. Because you're like, why would you go that way?
Yeah, there's no, you know what? It's not earned. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's just like, no, why? Yeah, unless she's like there to spy on them, which clearly she's not. She's trying to just get away. Right? She's got her information. She wants to get out of there. So why are you going to like take the route where you're most likely to be detected? You know, it's like, no. And clearly, you know, since we didn't see it, we don't know, but you have to assume she didn't go through that way the first time. So go back the way you came.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. It does. It's dumb. There's no doubt. It's dumb. But you know, clearly for the story to work, they had to have a few things happen, and one of them was Maggie. The Dama had to see Maggie, and Maggie had to see the Dama.
Well, I don't like it. Damn it.
Damn it! We're gonna write ourselves a letter to our local DJ. I'll tell you.
So we get the ending of the Frankenstein scene, and it ends kind of surprisingly. Because, you know, both Bruegel and Negan are interfering, and Negan takes the Frankenstein guy, and he gets his arm sort of caught on the top of the fence. So now
he gets his breastplate.
Yeah, so he's all caught up, and he's caught on the edge, and he can't move, and his back is exposed, and the ghoul is coming towards him, and is coming towards his neck, and he's got the spikes, and, you know, Negan's like, basically like, haha, I've got you now, and you can hear Bruegel in the background like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And at that last second, and Tony reveals himself, and Tony has like a, oh my God, and his eyes start to like, because he's looking all around, and Negan sees his eyes and sees that he's a human, and is like, oh my God, and realizes if he lets this happen, a person is gonna die. And so he unhooks him from the fence. He was all stuck, and he unhooks him, and he gets back into fighting with the ghoul, and it's like bam, 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 and then the next thing you know, bam, he falls on top of the ghoul, and he spikes them from behind with his spikes on his thing. And so, in effect, Bruegel has won, because of this.
Yes.
But then we get this great scene where they're like, yeah, you've won, and he goes to shake his hand, but then he leans in and he whispers, and exactly what he said.
Oh yeah.
You need to get rid of your guy. Like, I know what you did, and I'll keep it quiet if you get rid of him tonight. And
well, it's also you won the match, but if you want to keep your little secret, you're not going to get the methane.
Right, exactly.
That's what I thought he told him.
And it's either way, it's a threat, and it's great because in that moment he backs away from Negan, and the change is like that, because he's got like this look of concern on his face, and then realizes everybody's looking at me, and then he's like, whoa, what a match. It's like
so great,
and it's just like, oh my god, it was just so well done. And he basically says, I may have won, but I am still gonna help you because that's what you do. And he tries to make it all
without the methane.
Yeah,
I'm gonna just do it with just the alliance, just like you guys wanted, because I'm super cool.
Yeah, he's like basically trying to make it seem like I'm a great guy, and really that's not the reason he did it, and we know that. But I'm not sure we'll have like the satisfaction of the Dama ever finding any of that out. It'll be interesting to see. Because the final scene of the whole thing is that you get him having his moment with Tony, and Tony's revealed, and he's got his mask off and everything. And there's this...
He's eating a rat.
He's eating his rat. He earned his rat. You did really good today. And he takes a little washcloth and he wipes his face a little. And he tells him, and he's like, but unfortunately, someone found out our secret. And we can't have that. And he, I've been good to you, haven't I? And he's like, haven't I?
Yes.
And he's like, he like squeezes it out, and he's like, yes. So he's like, okay, great. Like, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next thing, which is okay, bye-bye. And he has this really great watch with a little blade that comes out, and he cuts his throat right away.
Oh yeah, a lot of throat cutting on this show.
Yeah. And he's sad for a hot second, and then goes to the window, and is looking out, and there's this great moment where he's like, I still gotta move. Still have moves to play. And I was curious, like, to me, because he's looking out at Central Park, I'm wondering if that means involving the people that live there. Is it involving, like, he knows there's animals in Central Park? Like, is Central Park a part of it, or is he just out, or does it mean nothing? He's just like looking out upon the city, and he's just making his proclamation that he's got moves to play. Yeah. What did you think? How did you interpret that scene?
I'm not sure, because he could have been looking across the park to where Christos is, right? Because they're all like on one side of the park or the other. Right. It could be, again, we heard something roaring in the park in the last episode that was not like a lion or anything. So maybe there are, remember last year they had the ghoul that was like 6 ghouls mushed together? Maybe there's something like that that he knows about or something, and he thinks he could be the crazy cafe people. I again, at this point with him, who knows? I mean, it could be all of them, could be none of them. So I just think he clearly feels that there is, still something, levers he can pull to get the methane, because that's what it's all about.
Right. It's all just a play to get the methane.
Yeah. I do like it when he's talking to Tony, and he looks at him and he goes, I gave you the greatest thing that one can have in this world. And he looks at him and he goes, a purpose. I thought that was a really cool line. that as he's literally like, building up the time to kill him.
Yeah.
He's telling him how great he is and how he's really gonna miss him and so on.
I gave you purpose, and
and
now that purpose has come to an end.
it has, because like, clearly he can't use him ever again.
Oh yeah.
In the arena, there's no way. And whether Negan told him that or not, like I always, like when I've watched it, I just think Negan's basically saying, I know the deal with Frankenstein, and if you want me to keep quiet, you're not taking the methane. But it's very possible he said, oh, and by the way, he don't fight no more.
Yep.
As well on top of it. It's very, very possible. But I also loved when after he finishes whispering, and like you're right, Brugo's like, wow, that was so great. And then he says something like, we played by the rules ish.
That's a great thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was super funny. So, and then I also too that there's one other little scene that we kind of skipped over before this scene, which is Maggie comes back onto the roof, and Pearlie is up there, and she's like, "Oh my God, where's Herschel?" Because that's like every other line out of Maggie's mouth on this show.
Scene, yeah.
And Pearlie's like, "I don't know, I just got here, and you're the second person back." And then Herschel comes climbing up out of the same opening that she just did, and Pearlie's like, "Oh, there he is." And then she comes over and she's like, where were you? Are you okay? And he, again, out and out lies to her and just says, yeah, I just got lost. He does not mention the Dama or anything. But the look on Maggie's face, I mean, she is just heartbroken, because I think she, at that moment, realizes that Negan's right.
Yeah.
And that, I can't trust my own son here, because clearly something is going on with that crazy woman that I just saw, so yeah. And again, very short scene, very quick, but a very telling scene.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a scene that was sort of at the end, and we can sort of go back to things that we didn't get to. I think it was that first scene when they're sort of waiting around on the roof. They get talking about their kids, and
yes.
And Pearlie was sort of referring back to when they were walking through the park, and they were talking about the things they missed from the old world, and Herschel made this comment where he's like, I don't get it. I don't get why you guys are so fixated on the old world. It seemed like all you guys ever did was fight, and there was this search for power and blah, blah, blah. It just, it doesn't hold any appeal to Herschel, right? Well, of course it wouldn't. He has no connection to it.
He has no connection.
Born in the apocalypse, yeah. And
I just think it's ironic, though, that like exactly what he said people did in the old world is what they're doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. And so that sort of stuck with Pearlie, and they're talking on the roof about family and things like that, and Pearlie says, when he got back after being in Manhattan, previous, after the first season, he just wanted to take his family and go, because he just wanted them to be safe, and so he was giving Maggie some props there, saying, being a parent is the hardest thing. So he's basically like, being a single parent is even harder. It's just
Absolutely.
her, and all of the responsibility of what, how she wants to raise Herschel, and the choices to make are all, she's the only one. And he made this really great comment that I thought was really, really, really interesting, about how in the apocalypse, all people are doing is fighting towards trying to maintain and get some normalcy back, because they are trying to get back to the way it was before. And so they're trying to recapture this thing, which is nearly impossible. They're never going to get everything back the way it was, but there's this, there's always this urgency to try as hard as you can to maintain some normalcy and get things as close as possible to that. And, Herschel's comment he made earlier in the episode about, what's so great about the before times, what's different about that than it is about here. And Pearlie made a great comment when he tied that all together by saying, all this work that we're doing to get back to the way it was, how much is it for them, meaning the children, and how much is it for us? And I thought that was a really great line, to sort of tie all of that sentiment together, you know, in their hearts, they're like, oh, I want to go back to the way it was because I don't want my children to be raised in this world where it's all brutality and violence and da-da-da-da. So you saying you're doing it for them, but how much of it is selfish that you're doing it for yourself, you know?
Yeah. You say it's for them, but it's really
deep down, it's really for you.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I want to make sure I'd forgotten about that when we got through that scene, and that's a really great line. Anything else that anything on your list that we didn't really get through, or something you want to get back to and discuss before we move on?
It's not on the list. We talked about it a little bit, but when they're eating the rats, we touched on a little bit. Kim Coates is just, I mean, it's so funny how he is just ripping on the Croat about his accent and you know, and he's like trying to talk, he's like doing like a really like, you know, bad impression of the Croat talking, and his men are laughing out loud. I mean, it is so great, and it's mean-spirited, right? I mean, it's not like two friends like, you know, giving each other crap. I mean, it's like, I really don't like you, but we're playing nice right now, so I'm talking in a very soft voice and smiling, but everything that I'm saying is basically saying, I hope you die. You know what I mean? It's just, it was just great. And even though all the unbelievable, I don't really understand gladiatorial stuff is going on while they're having that stuff, the fact that he was doing all that made it fun, and I did not mind. You know, I'm watching these two ghouls fight, and in the back of my head, I'm like, why are they fighting? How are they fighting? They shouldn't be fighting. Who's fighting? You know, and because he was just having so much fun, just, you know, teasing and mean-spiritedly, you know, criticizing the Croat. I just thought that was great. So I just wanted to point that out. That again, Kim Coates is, I mean, whatever they paid him to be on the show, they got their money's worth just in this episode, because he was great.
I agree. He's fantastic. I can't wait to get more of him. I'm not sure how much he figures into the next episode, but you know, it's clearly we've got a bunch more to go. So there's definitely room to get a whole lot more Bruegel as we move forward.
Well, and he is in it in the scenes for next week. They do show him, so he is going to be in it.
There is that one little scene they show. Yeah. So
yeah, I don't know how much, like you said, but yeah, he will at least be in this.
Whatever much it is, it's going to be great no matter what.
Yes.
All right. Well, if we got nothing else to talk about, then I think that means we're ready to go ahead and take our break. So we're going to go ahead and do that, folks. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to discuss our listener feedback and what's coming up on the podcast.
So everyone, please stick around like a rat on a stick, and we'll be right back.
Now there's about 20 of them out there.
What will we do?
Don't worry, we're safe in here. They'll never get in.
Why is it that in every zombie story, people always think that their safe haven is invulnerable?
I know. It's like, hello, the walkers are totally gonna get in. You better get ready for it.
No! Diane, get behind me. No, it's not stopping.
Do something, Jack!
And another thing, how come nobody in a zombie story has ever seen a zombie story?
Do you know how much time in human life would be saved if just one person in the group was up on the genre?
What do we do?
Aim for the head.
What?
Aim for the head.
You heard them. Aim for the head.
Quick, Diane, I think we should try and fix the barricades.
I think we should listen to them.
Now, that's the first good idea they've had all episode.
I still don't think they're gonna make it.
Aim for the Head, a horror apocalypse entertainment podcast. Join hosts Diana and Steve as they recap and discuss the best of horror, sci-fi, fantasy, and apocalyptic entertainment. Aim for the Head, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Find us on Instagram and Blue Sky.
Hi, this is Tom Savini, and you're listening to the Aim for the Head podcast with Diana and Steve. And don't forget to always aim for the head, because body shots just don't work.
Hey there, everyone. We are back. We're going to go ahead and jump right into our listener feedback. And we did get a very small, scant amount of feedback for this episode, but what we did have is and my apologies. We did get a couple of emails from our pal Andy from Germany, and they were sent in time for last week's podcast, and I just missed them entirely. So Andy, my apologies, but we have your emails for basically all of the episodes leading up to tonight. So apologies they didn't make it in last week like they should have, but here we go. So he sort of combined his thoughts on episodes 1 and 2 in his first email. So he says, "Hi Diana, hi Steve. There is something I realized." Hey there. There's something I realized listening to your podcast. It's indeed 15 years into the zombie apocalypse, but we get the same stories as in the beginning. The bricks are like the hilltop, and New Babylon like the sanctuary. They pretend to save people while in fact they intimidate them by killing one of them to gain the others as slaves. So Maggie has to deal with them to protect her people. It's the same old story, but the problem is the old story doesn't work anymore 15 years later. Why would Maggie live at a shitty place like the bricks? She could lie in the sun at the beach of Oceanside. She could take a hot shower at Alexandria, or she could enjoy some chocolate ice cream together with her friends at the Commonwealth. Raise her son at a place where he is safe, can go to school and doesn't get his toes cut off. What the hell is Maggie doing at New Babylon? The conflict between New Babylon and the gangs of Manhattan is just as silly as Maggie. New Babylon needs walkers to produce methane, so they invade Manhattan. What? Walkers are running around everywhere. Fear vibes indeed. You're wrong, Steve. The walker cannon wouldn't work. The acceleration is much too high. They would be red goo spraying out of the cannon. Perhaps you remember the catapult shooting walkers at Victor Strand's tower. This could possibly work because range and speed of a catapult is much lower. So we can state that Dead City is more unrealistic than Fear the Walking Dead. Yay. Greetings from Germany, Andy. Now, mind you, people, think of how you felt about episodes 1 and 2. And episode 2 was the assault on Manhattan, which was assaulting to the senses is what it was. So, Andy, yes, you are right there with us. We had so many problems with those 2 episodes. They didn't make sense. So I am with you and totally understand. And what's great is I'm really curious to see what you think of this week's episode. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you next week and have your thoughts on episode 4. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Just looking at your comments, it's a good question. I don't know why I can't really remember. Why did Maggie leave the Commonwealth? I know why she wouldn't live in Alexandria because Negan was there, but why did she not want to stay at the Commonwealth? Did she leave before the end? I can't remember. It's been
fuzzy.
A number
I don't
of years.
remember, and I don't know if it was like she wanted to like branch out on her own or whatever and just
but that's dumb. Why would you do that?
And the thing is that the stories she tells is with Herschel and how young he was because he was a little guy.
He had a whistle.
But I feel like she tells these stories about how her and Herschel are, and I'm using air quotes, like on the road and, finding little communities and things like that. Like, yeah, it feels like, why would you do that? Like, why when you knew that there's a place you could go and maybe you have problems with one of the communities, but you would be welcomed and you wouldn't be treated like like a gang member or you know what I mean? Like she'd have some respect at least. I don't know. It's you make a good point there, Andy, that the whole premise of her being out on the road and not being with the people of Alexandria or Oceanside or the rebuilding of the hilltop and all that other stuff, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. There were multiple places she could have gone that were established communities that knew her, that would welcome her, that would protect her, and so on. And then your comment on why would New Babylon go to Manhattan to get walkers? I really think the reason they're going to Manhattan is they want to get the technology to turn the walkers into methane. That's what they're after. They don't know how to do that. They know that because Pearlie has reported, they know that the Croat can do it. and has developed it, but they don't know how. And so that's why they're there. That's not that they need walkers, like you said, there are walkers everywhere. They need to get the science. Kind of the same thing that Bruegel was saying when he was like, hey, we should make methane here, and all we need is a little bit of your scientific expertise to set it up. Right? Because again, he doesn't know how they do it either. And so I think that's their main reason for going. It's not that we got to get a whole bunch of walkers and then, smush them into goo or whatever. So, and the cannons thing, yeah, I didn't really think about it, but you're probably right that, the force of that cannon firing would liquefy or destroy a lot of the human body, and and if they're already filled with methane, you'd think there'd be a real chance that they would just blow up right in the gun barrel, right when but yeah, you're right. And I was kind of thinking of the catapult sequence from Fear when they were like launching walkers into the building, which was kind of amusing as I remember. You see the window and the walker hits it and then slowly slides down, right? If you remember that. But yeah, anyway, Andy, great feedback. I'm really happy that you did not refer to me as Steven this time. That makes me very happy. So thank you for that. I always feel like I'm in trouble, when someone says Steven, it's like, uh-oh, I did something. So anyway, great feedback, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Andy. And like I said, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on episode 4, because I hope that you like it, that it improved upon these episodes for sure. So thanks so much, Andy.
Absolutely. All right, so moving along, we have an email from Andy from Germany.
There you go.
And this one came in, I think, last week. After we started
I can't
recording,
remember if it was,
we just missed it.
I think it might have been able to make it on the recording. So again, this could have made it in last week's episode, and again, apologies, but it is for last week's episode, which is his usual, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, right. We're kind of back on how it normally
We're on
works.
Andy's schedule again.
Yes. Yeah, we're on Andy's schedule, which is pretty cool. And again, this was an email, and he starts out saying, "Hello, Diana and Steve. Just watched episode 3 of the Negan and Maggie shenanigans," which, wow. Why didn't they call the show that? I think that's a great title. He goes, "It's a filler episode, so I can't comment much. I was surprised that Herschel is that clumsy in shooting someone. I would have thought that's routine for him." And yeah, I remember he couldn't pull the trigger on the big dude, Waylon. And then when he finally tried to shoot at Negan, they were standing like 5 feet away from each other, and he missed very badly. And Andy, you're absolutely right. For this kid that, like you just said, Diana, that he grew up, and I'm using air quotes, on the road, and learning to take care of himself and protect himself since he was a little kid, you'd think he would know how to handle a gun. At least better than the way he showed in that episode. Andy goes on to say, "Oh, but one important thing happened. What Herschel said about his mom always thinking about Negan, it gave me new hope that these two will finally become a couple." I know deep down, all their heart, they truly love each other. Now they got 2 kids to take care of, so marrying is the responsible decision. Since we know that Negan is polygamous, his other wife is no hindrance. Maybe at the finale, they would be so great and also make the series much more interesting. Greetings from Germany, Andy. And Andy, I hope you're kidding. I was always joking about this last year that, they're clearly, they hate each other, and they have that kind of, the kind of rom-com setup of the 2 people that can't stand each other at the beginning, but pretty soon they're making googly eyes at each other, right? But I somehow think that's not going to happen with these 2. What do you think?
I think if Maggie and Negan hooked up, even if it was like a dream sequence, I think the Walking Dead universe fandom would explode. Oh yeah.
You think?
Oh hell yeah.
What if they hooked up under a dumpster?
That'd be even worse. It's terrible. It's all a terrible idea. It should not happen. If they do, it would be the end of everything.
It would really be it.
I understand from a comedy perspective, like maybe kind of wanting it to be, poked at or whatever. I could see. I'm fine with like they end up doing more things together and someone making jokes about it. Like maybe Bruegel sees them together and he doesn't understand their history and says, "You guys are like an old married couple." Like that'd be fine.
Oh, go get a room.
Right, that'd be fine because they do have a chemistry. But no.
So you're saying there's a chance, though?
I actually think it'd be interesting we talked about this as soon as they brought the specter of the idea of Annie and Joshua. Do you think we will actually see them this season?
The more that the Dama talks about, they're at the Appalachian Trail right now, and that's a danger. Like I'm getting the sense that no, we're not.
All right.
And I'm still not, convinced that they have them. I think this might just be a bluff.
Could be, yeah.
I think that, like maybe they found out about them, but by the time they got to where they were, they'd escaped, they'd made it across the Mississippi or whatever, and now she's just kind of holding that over him. And, Negan can't take the chance that she's lying, because if she's not, then, big trouble. But yeah, I don't think so. What do you think? Do you think that they're going to make an appearance?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like a Chekhov's gun thing. Like, it's kind of like they either have to put up or shut up. If they keep talking about it, then they have to kind of show them. Even if they like recast the actress and you only see her from behind or something like that, you know what I mean? But I'm not sure that the fandom, because there's so many people who are anti-Negan and feel like he shouldn't have been given a spin-off at all. But I'm not sure that the fandom is ready to see a Negan child and have that be like, it's one thing in the abstract, but for it to be a reality and to see, because then that's like an instant like amount of empathy and Negan doesn't deserve it. You know what I mean? It's he's done too many bad things in the past. You don't want him to be tortured or whatever, like in that sense. But everybody's got a kid. Making him have a kid doesn't make him any more special than anyone else. So I don't know. I think there's a built-in amount of empathy you have for someone who is a parent of a small child, and I think. I don't know that the fandom would allow it. I'm not sure that would go over very well. I don't know. I'm not averse to like I said, like, oh, there's Annie right there and you see her from behind and then she gets shot dead right in front of them or so, you know what I mean? Like something like that. But I'm not sure that we would see a full scene, but I think a little tease of them would be fine considering we've spent the whole season talking about them. I don't know, but I understand what you're saying though too, that it could possibly just be not at all. I don't know.
Yeah, they're just holding it over him. Yeah. So what about this? What if the Dama finds Annie, right, cuts off one of her arms, and then has her stand in some mud that somehow freezes and she can't get out of it? Would that work for you?
No, because it didn't work for me the first time that this stupid fandom tried to do something like that. No.
And that would have been Tracy's mom if you're not having a blanking on that
her?
moment.
Tracy's mom has only got one arm.
That's it. She's only got one arm. She's stuck in some mud that's froze real hard. I do remember. Anyway, again, Andy, I hope you're being at least a little tongue in cheek on the Negan Maggie marriage, because I agree with you, Diana. I think that would be grounds for the fan base to revolt. Yeah. So
sorry, Andy. Listen, I don't want to stomp on anyone's dreams or yuck their yum. If it happens, I will revolt, but I'll be happy for you. How's that sound? Okay? All right.
There we go.
Thank you for writing in, Andy. We appreciate every time you write in. And like I said, looking forward to next week and what you thought of episode 4.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I want to hear your take on the gladiatorial fights and see, because I'm sure there are other things we missed that I'm looking forward to seeing what they are. So yeah, absolutely.
So next up, we only got one little teeny tiny piece of feedback for this episode. And Karen Cohen wrote in, Karen, not related to Lauren Cohen, wrote in via the Facebooks, and she said, coats. But coats that you wear, Coates, Kim Coates, the actor.
Oh,
so she spelled it like Coates. So yes, Coates. And she's not wrong. He is delightful.
Yeah, he really, it was so great. Did you watch the featurette?
I sure did.
Because, Jeffrey D. Morgan says that he was a huge fan of Sons of Anarchy. And he said that he's known Kim Coates for a long time, but this is the first time they've ever gotten to work together. So he was very excited when they cast him in this.
Yeah.
So, but that was really fun. I just thought it was really cool that he's like, yeah, I watched the show called Sons of Anarchy, and there's this guy in it, and you're like, who is that? And so that was really cool. So
yeah, we love the Kim Coates. Keep him coming. So, speaking of, we were just talking a little bit ago about next week's episode. So next week's episode, coming up on the podcast, episode 5, title of the episode is The Bird Always Knows. And that's all we got, because there's no description, just some images, the little stuff at the end of the episode, little clips package. It looks like next step is to try and gain Christos in the alliance to fight New Babylon, and then we see some moments of violence. It looks like I saw something that looked like Bruegel and his guys at night with some torches and some sticks, and there was Herschel. Looks like he was there too, so I don't know what's gonna happen there. But that all looks very interesting. And like you said, yes, there is like at least a little bit of Bruegel that we'll see next week as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And there's also what looks like a scene like the ghouls are like trying to break into the cafe.
Oh, I didn't clock that when I was watching the scenes. That sucks.
Yeah, so it looks like a large, number of ghouls have decided that the free hearts or not, they're still going to go in and try and eat all those people. So I don't know what that means, and I could be wrong. It could be another building, but that was what it looked like to me when I watched it. Yeah.
All right. So. Well, that's what's going to come up on the podcast next week. We did notice when we were, at least I noticed, there's been a couple of trailers that have come out recently for the next installment in the 28 series. Obviously we had 28 Days Later, classic zombie movie, and then we've got 28.
Is it a zombie movie though?
It's a rage virus movie. It's an apocalypse movie for sure.
It's an infected people movie. It's not. I don't think you can use the Z word here because they're not technically deceased. But yeah.
But still. Classic movie.
Oh, it's an
so
amazing
great.
Movie. And Danny Boyle,
and then,
absolutely great.
That was followed up by 28 Weeks Later, and now we have 28 Years Later, and that's coming out in like less than a month. There's some nice trailers that have been online. I've been trying to not watch very many of them because I really am interested in this. So we've covered 28 Days Later on the podcast. We haven't actually covered 28 Weeks Later, so maybe we could remedy that. But we're considering covering 28 Years Later. Why not?
Absolutely.
There have been some really good horror movies so far this year that have been released, and this looks like it's going to capture a really nice big chunk of audience. You've got all of the fans for the series built in so far, and it'll just be I think it's going to do really nicely at the box office. So let's hope so too. As people say, the numbers overall are down, which makes sense, with streaming, etc. So people aren't going to the movies. So if you are interested in seeing it on the movie theater, clearly try and do your best to see it in that first like week or two that it's out, because the way things go these days, you know how it is. It probably won't be in the theater for very long before it's released to streaming. Now, it is heading into the summer, and this does release in June. And
June 20th.
Summer movies have a tendency, the last couple of years, summer movies tend to have a little bit more staying power because you have a much more built-in audience. You know, you've got kids off of school, so your numbers alone are higher, and it's blockbuster time, so there's all of that. So hopefully this stays in the theaters for a little bit beyond that usual like 2 weeks that's been happening. But the only way you can do that is keep those numbers up. So go and see it. You know, it's going to be fun to see on the movie theater. That's for sure. Because who doesn't want that kind of stuff right in front of your face on a big screen?
Oh my God, yeah. Oh. Well, and then they're the track star monsters, so they're always running, right? And so you kind of have that we gotta go, type of action. So yeah, it's gonna be real interesting to see, and the interesting thing for me is that they almost are 28 years after the first movie came out, which is just mind-boggling to me that it's been that long.
I'm excited. I really hope they stick the landing on this one. They've got a lot to live up to, in terms of classic horror and classic apocalyptic feel. So we're looking forward to it, and hopefully you guys are too. I think that's about it. I don't think we have anything else to discuss this week. Do we?
Just a couple things that I wanted to mention. There's a movie that is, I think it's on Max now, and it just showed up, and it came out earlier this year, and it's called Mickey 17.
Oh, yeah.
And it stars Robert Pattinson, the fresh off his Batman success. But the reason why I'm bringing it up here, it's about a guy who gets cloned, and he's called Mickey 17 because this is the 17th version of him. And he's like an expendable crew member on this expedition to another planet. So whenever anything dangerous comes up, they always send him out to do it. And he tends to get killed a lot, but they have the ability to grow a new one of him back in their ship, right? But the reason I'm bringing it up is that The Walking Dead's very own Steve Yeun plays his best friend in the movie. So
that's right. Yeah.
So yes, so you get a chance to see Glenn, and he's very funny in it, and it's kind of an uneven movie. I think it's a little long. Mark Ruffalo is hilarious as this shall we say Donald Trump-esque leader of this expedition, and Toni Collette's in it, and she's great and everything. So yeah, I like I said, it just showed up on streaming. So if you get a chance, check it out. I liked it. It's not perfect. It's not great. But it's got a lot of good stuff going for it. The aliens they run into are really fun and cool to see. And then the other thing, which is on, I want to say Netflix, there is a series version of the story, The Four Seasons.
Yes.
And this has Tina Fey and Will Forte and Steve Carell, but in Walking Dead universe, it also has Coleman Domingo. Yes. So, and he's great because he's
himself,
great
and it's great. Yeah.
So yeah. Yes. And it's very funny and sad. It's literally, the first couple episodes are the spring, and then you get the summer, and then the fall, and then the winter, and it's these people and what's going on in their lives. And if you remember the movie from the 70s with Alan Alda, which was quite a hit back then, you'll understand what it's about. And again, the acting in it is, for the most part, really good, and Coleman Domingo is outstanding.
I agree.
So.
I binged that a week or two ago.
It's been out for
about a month, I think.
It's been out for about a month,
and it's been at the top of the list for a lot of people, and it's worth it. The episodes are really quick. I think they're only like a half an hour, and it's 6 of them, so it does go really fast. And I really, really, really enjoyed it. I thought they did a great job with it. So yeah, give it a whirl. I also was going to throw out there, there's a series that just started like about a week or two ago on Netflix as well, and it's called The Eternaut, and it's Argentinian, and it's a apocalyptic tale, and it's it's really, really good. I still have to. I've been having trouble getting into Netflix on my TV in my bedroom, and so the last couple of nights I've just been like, screw it, and I haven't been able to jump back into it. But I have watched the first couple of episodes. The first episode is fantastic and really pulls you right in. So it's a really great series. Very, very interesting way to look at like an apocalyptic event. So I recommend it so far. I'm curious if others have watched it. If they've got thoughts, send them in. It's really, really interesting. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we were talking about. We talked about that a little bit on the Last of Us episode we just did, and I watched like most of the first episode, and then I kind of got pulled out of it, and I have not gone back to it. But it is definitely, I am going back to it at some point. I just haven't had a chance to. So.
Same, absolutely. And that's also another thing. If you are watching Dead City but haven't done Last of Us, what are you waiting for? It's such a great series. But if you weren't aware, we're also covering The Last of Us as well. So you can just back up a handful of episodes and get started at episode 1. 7 episodes this season instead of the 8 of the season before. But 7 episodes, and we really, really love this season. So you can always just backtrack and watch and listen to our podcast as a little companion to your watching of The Last of Us.
Sounds like a good idea.
But I think that's about it. I think we're going to wrap it up. So we look forward to chatting with you guys next week and talking about episode 5 for Dead City, and coming up with thoughts of things to do in the future with you. But we're going to go ahead and cut it off with just that. So until next week, as always, I'm Diana. Don't forget to always aim for the head.
Because body shots, they just don't work.
To send us an email, write us at aimfortheheadpodcast@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is @AFTH Podcast. Pictures and video are always welcome at our Instagram account, Aim for the Head Podcast, all one word. But the best way to keep in touch with us is to just like our Facebook page to get all of our updates in your feed.
You know, there's nothing sexier than having a girl on a call tell you about her phlegm gob. Ooh.
We've reached that level in our relationship where the phlegm gob discussion is okay.